Hello, my name is Jaru, and today I'm talking about Deltarune. There will be major spoilers for both Deltarune and Undertale, so please play them both before watching this. Today, I'm going to be ranking 85 prominent Deltarune fan theories in a tier list. I asked my community for their favorite Deltarune theories and included all the ones that got suggested a decent number of times. I also included every theory to come from a YouTube video with 100,000 views or more. Shoutouts to Galaxy for this idea. Their tier list videos were what inspired me to do my own. That said, I will be doing something a little bit different. Galaxy ranked theories based off how likely they were to be true, which is great, but since several of my own theories are on this tier list, that doesn't really work for me. If I ranked them by which I thought would be true, all my theories would be an S tier, and everyone else's would be much lower, which would be pretty boring. So instead, I'm ranking these theories not based off how likely they are to be true, but off how much I would like them to be true. This means that even really silly and impossible theories have a shot at getting high tier if I think they're interesting enough. Now, normally this would be the part of the video where I explain what each of the tiers mean, but I've learned my lesson. If I define what these tiers mean now, I'll inevitably end up changing my mind halfway through the video, and then I'll have hundreds of comments complaining about me not following my own rules. As such, I'll just give y'all a general rule of thumb. The more I like the idea of a theory being true, the higher it will rank. That's it. And that is all the setup out of the way. But before we dive in, I'd just like to mention my Patreon. If you could donate even a single $1 a month, it would go a long way towards keeping this channel up and running. If you can't afford it, that's fine too. I'm just happy you're here. With all that said, let's get to the video. Alrighty, let's dive into these fan theories. The first one up on the chopping block is second intro voice is Chara. Now, for context, I will be explaining all of the theories that I will be ranking today in order to give you guys, context. Obviously, you probably haven't heard of some of these, so giving you a little explanation seems appropriate. This theory argues that in the intro vessel creation sequence, there are two different characters who speak to you. The first is Jeff, who speaks for the majority of the time, and then Chara takes over. The evidence for this is that in this segment here, when the voice says that no one can choose who they are in this world, the font changes, it becomes a lot more rude, and it, specifically in Japanese, switches from one of the alphabets to another of the alphabets, which is unusual. So, in that regard, that's the evidence for it potentially being a different character, and the specific alphabet it switches to, people found reminiscent of the alphabet used and speaking pattern used by the fallen child at the end of the Genocide route. So, that's the premise of this theory. Chara's working with Jeff, which, for those who don't know, Jeff is my name for the person who helps us build a vessel. And what do I think of it? What do I think of this theory? Do I want it to be true? Do I like the idea of the fallen child being an antagonist working alongside Jeff? I think I'm going to put it in C tier because I'm largely neutral. I'm not opposed to Chara being a part of this game, the fallen child. I'm not opposed to them playing a larger role in the narrative, mainly because it'd be a nice opportunity to actually learn what the character was actually like, because we don't really get to find out much of anything about this character in Undertale. The only time we even get to speak to them, they've become a soulless reincarnation in the form of the demon, and I don't personally consider that to be like an entity that you can compare to the original human. So I don't think Flowey and his behavior should reflect poorly on Asriel. Similarly, I don't think the demon's behavior at the end of Genocide should reflect poorly on Chara, but aka Fallen Child. But with that said, because we know so little about them, that's also why I don't really care that much about this theory. It's like, oh, whoop-de-doo, you know, like, I don't really care. It's not that I dislike it. I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think it would hurt the story. And the idea of Jeff and Chara being a dynamic duo, like maybe Jeff is the mad scientist and Chara is their assistant. So, like, that's a fun enough idea. But since both Jeff and Chara are completely enigmatic figures whose personalities we basically have no idea about, it's hard for me to think particularly strongly one way or another. So I think I'm going to put this in C tier. If it turns out to be true, cool. Toby Fox could probably do something interesting with this, but I doubt it. Also, I don't know if me in the intro says this, but I'm going. The tiers are kind of in flux. In whenever I do a tier list, I usually start the video being like, "This is what the tiers mean," and by the end of the video, I'm like, "I've changed my mind. The tiers mean something different." So right now, for me, I'm thinking C tier is like theories that Toby Fox could absolutely make really cool, but which I have no opinion at this time. That brings me to Foreshadow's Foreshadow by HBC, which is Half-Bred Chaos. This theory is the idea that in the Queen's Mansion, there is this puzzle you do where there's 4 shadows that you have to align in a box. It's one of the puzzles that Berdly fails at. And most of them are, like, really basic. They're like, you know, make a diamond shape. And then, like, the next puzzle is, like, make Queen's face. But the last one has 4 very distinct images that are used. Like, one's a house, one's a bluebird, one's, like, a wave, and one's something else. I'll probably put it all on screen. And the theory by Half-Bred Chaos was the primary theory was that they are foreshadowing. And that they are foreshadowing something that's going to happen in Deltarune, with different things representing different characters or ideas or what have you. The main evidence for it being that, you know, the bluebird reflects the bluebird that is Berdly. So maybe the other 3 represent characters as well. Totally valid possibility. I'm not opposed to it. HBC spends the rest of the video basically just trying to figure out what it might be foreshadowing, which is fun. I like foreshadowing. I prefer things to be foreshadowing than not be, because when you're foreshadowing stuff, that means you have an idea of what you're doing. Oftentimes, you don't bother with foreshadowing when you're a completely, like... when you're writing when you're watching a show where they're writing by the seat of their pants, you don't get much foreshadowing. It's usually very, like if you're watching Doctor Who, it's like, if they're going to foreshadow something, it'll be something that'll be happening that season. And even then, it's not that subtle. You know, what they're foreshadowing. Whereas Toby Fox is pretty good about foreshadowing things. So I like this theory. I'm all about finding little foreshadowing secrets in the little eggs left to us by Toby Fox. So yeah, I feel vaguely positive about this. I think it's I would not be opposed to this being true. I think it would be cool. Next is the idea that the angel from the angel's heaven, aka from the prophecy that Ralsei tells us, is the player. F tier. If you watched my most recent video about the Gaster Files video, you'll know that I am not very kind towards theories built around the player being an integral part of the plot. Some people have gotten in their heads that this is because, I just don't like meta stuff. I don't like stuff where the player is involved in the story. And it's like, no, that's not the issue. I just specifically think that the way the fan base imagines the player and imagines the player's role in the narrative is skewed. I think they don't understand what Toby Fox is doing with the player and what Toby Fox has historically done with the player. The player is basically non-existent, narratively speaking. In Undertale, you don't do anything. Frisk does things. And 99.9% of dialogue directed at us is actually canonically being directed at Frisk. Pretty much the only character who might acknowledge the player is Chara at the end of Genocide, the fallen child. No, it's not even a might. Chara's the only one who acknowledges us. Flowey might acknowledge us at the end of True Pacifist, but it could, people have also argued that it might not even be him acknowledging the player. It could be him acknowledging Chara again, because he does call us by the fallen child's name. So there's really only one time that the player is given any time of day, and it's when everyone else in the universe is already dead. So the idea that the player is this integral part of the plot that has to be directly acknowledged and directly made into the story, I just don't think that's what Toby Fox is interested in. I understand other games have done this, where they make the player like an active part of the story, but that's not really I don't think that's Toby Fox's jam. He likes meta-narratives, where the events happening to the characters can also be read in a meta way through the lens of a video game. But that meta lens is external. It is something that we see, but the characters don't see. So I don't believe in the player being this integral part of the plot. And any theory based around the player being this canonical entity that is actively involved in the core story is not going to be regarded well by me. I am generally opposed to it. I don't think it jives well with Toby Fox's writing style, and I don't think I would enjoy it very much myself. The reason I found Undertale so engaging was because Flowey was meta, and it was terrifying, but at the end of the day, there were limits to it. He didn't actually know that I exist. He was canonically talking to Frisk. So, yeah. I appreciate the meta-narrative. I don't think the meta-narrative should become the narrative, to put it that way. I think the player's influence should be meta, not actually part of the plot. So, yeah. That's my opinion on that. Yeah. I assume I explained this theory well enough. It's just, the angel is such a vague entity that there's not much to this theory right now. Obviously, I have my own angel theory, but I don't think this is in reference to that. Next is Asgore had a hand in Dessa's disappearance. This is a theory that's been pushed by a couple people. I think SwankyBox might have had a video on this as well. But this was popular. I don't think they were specifically the one who came up with it. I think everyone suspected Asgore might have something going on there. Do I agree with them? Did Asgore have a hand in Dessa's disappearance? Do I agree? I do think something tragic happened, and some people blame Asgore. I think Toriel probably blames Asgore. Do I think it happened to Des, though? I don't know. I don't know what I think happened specifically with Asgore. I have a theory. I have a theory about the past of the Dreamer family that I've been knocking around in my head. But I haven't ironed out the details yet, and I'm not sure I believe it. So, I don't really have a hard and fast idea of what Asgore's history is yet. That's not an angle of the story I've yet to deeply explore. I will say I think there's only two possibilities regarding why Asgore lost his job, and why the mayor took away his job, and why Toriel's mad at him. It's probably something to do with children death, or children disappearance, because that's Asgore's whole deal. And this is a parallel story to Undertale, so it makes sense. And I think it has to either be Des or some other child. Maybe a human child, maybe another monster child, I don't know. But it definitely would have to be a child. The question is, do I think it's Des? I'm not sure if I don't know what I think. I don't know what I think. But I guess the question isn't, what do I think? The question is, would I like that? Would I like it if the Asgore history is he had some hand in Dessa's disappearance? Maybe not directly, maybe not, oh, he's a big bad murderer who killed Des, but like, it's partially his fault that they didn't find her. He took some action. No, I don't think I like it. I don't hate it the way I do like Angel player stuff, but I don't think I like this. I think that if Asgore's going to have a tragic moment in his past that caused him to lose his job and get Toriel pissed off, I don't think it's going to be some overt, like, oh, it's your fault that Des vanished kind of thing. I'm inclined to think Asgore is going to have blood on his hands. I'm inclined to think Asgore is going to be directly responsible for someone's death. Not this vague, oh, had a hand, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think if Asgore is going to, if there's something that's going to get him fired, it's him killing a child. So, I don't think it's going to be this. I think Des being the code character is interesting. I don't think it's interesting to have Asgore tied up in that. So I'm going to put it in D tier. I don't like it. I dislike it a little bit, but I don't hate it. Next, we get to the first theory of mine. This is my Ralsei theory, that Asriel is dead / possessing Kris. As I probably explained in the intro, I'm not going to rate it S tier just because I came up with it. There's a big difference, and I'm always trying to emphasize this to people. The difference between fanfiction and theories that, and my theories specifically, is that when you write fanfiction, you write stories that you want, stories that you like, stories that you find interesting. I didn't come up with this because I thought it was interesting. I came up with it because I thought it was true. People might not agree with it, and people might think it not has enough evidence, but I did not arrive at this because I thought it would be the hypest, coolest thing ever. I arrived at it because I think it's true, because I think it's what Toby Fox would do. He likes this sort of stuff. He likes the idea of children death, and then children possessing people, and then it being a tragic reveal at the end of the story. This is absolutely something he's done and would do again, especially in a story that's specifically paralleling Undertale. I think it's a very reasonable conclusion, narratively speaking. But just because I think it's likely to happen doesn't necessarily mean I think it's a good idea. So here's the question. What is my opinion of this theory in terms of, would I be happy if it was true? And I don't mean, and to be clear, I'm separating my happiness from being correct. Obviously, since I came up with the theory, I would be thrilled if I was right. But I wouldn't be thrilled because I like the story idea. I'd be thrilled because I predicted it. And I'm not going to be ranking it based off of that happiness. I'm basing it off of how much I would actually like it from a narrative perspective. And from a narrative perspective, Asriel being dead would be really sad and tragic and would parallel Undertale really well. It would really mess with the player base because, unlike me, most of them don't think Asriel's dead, and it would break their hearts to find out that the absolute darling that is Asriel is uber dead. It would add a huge layer of trauma and tragedy to Kris, which always makes protagonists more interesting. And the idea of Asriel being the one possessing Kris would add this whole new layer of reinterpretation to Deltarune. People will be going back through the game, like going, oh my god, this line means something completely different now that I know this is true. Now that I know that Asriel is potentially reading the line. When you look at it that way, I think this is really good. I think it's S tier. I would adore this being true. Even if I hadn't been the one to come up with it, I would love this. Because I think it adds a ton of replayability, it adds drama, it adds tragedy, it adds parallels to Undertale, just an absolute pile of parallels to Undertale. And it makes Kris more interesting, it makes Asriel more interesting. I think this would be awesome. I would love for this to be true. It might not be, but if it is, I'm going to freaking love it. So, yeah. I like how I did all that setup to be like, listen, I'm not going to put it in S tier just because I came up with it. And I would love for it to be correct, but I'm not going to rank it on that. I'm going to rank it in S tier because I think it's awesome, and it would be awesome if it came true. rest assured, not all my theories are going in S tier. In fact, I doubt I'll put any more of my theories in S tier. I think I'll probably end up putting the rest lower. Next is Asriel / Ralsei sing Don't Forget. This is the idea that one of these two is responsible for singing Don't Forget. As in, it's sung from their perspective. Not that Laura Shigihara is the voice of these characters, but rather that it is sang from their perspective. I think the brilliance of Don't Forget is that it can be interpreted as being from any character's point of view. Because it can both be an Asriel thing, like especially if Asriel's possessing Kris. It can be a Asocial Ralsei thing, because they are going to accompany Kris. It could be it could be the villain talking, perspective. Like, I think there's a lot of brilliance in this song. I think it's going to be able to be interpreted through any lens. Kind of like how Undertale's theme isn't about any specific Undertale character, but is instead about everyone in Undertale. I think Don't Forget is similar. So if it was specific, so if the idea is that it's revealed that this song is only being sung from Asriel or Ralsei's perspective, would I be happy about that? No, I would dislike that. I think that would be bad. I think it shouldn't be ever confirmed who is singing it. I think the idea of it being specifically something that can be interpreted as something sung from anyone's perspective is a lot more interesting than specifically Asriel or Ralsei. Next is Berdly. Oh, wait, whoops. Yeah, this goes in D tier because I don't like it. Berdly is fallen down in Weird Route. So this is the idea that in the Weird Route, specifically after getting snowgraved, Berdly is dying. He is effectively dead, but because he's a monster, he doesn't turn to dust instantly. He enters the state known as Fallen Down, which is a concept integrated in Undertale. And I really like that idea because Undertale never really did much with this concept. They pretty much only bothered to introduce it to be like, oh, this was the state the monsters were in when they were brought into Alphys Lab and turned into amalgamates. It's like, that's pretty much the only application for this concept in Undertale. Whereas in Deltarune, they have the opportunity to actually utilize it in an interesting way. Having this happen to Berdly, having this happen to Rudy, I think that the Deltarune's actually going to utilize this concept. And with that in mind, I almost don't even want... It's weird. I thought about having an extra tier just called Basically Canon, where I think it's just explicitly true and I don't even have opinions on it. But yeah, I think this is just correct. I think this theory is just 100% correct. I don't think there's any other way to interpret it. The spell literally says it's fatal. It does fatal damage. Fatal means it kills you. And then Berdly doesn't wake up in the real world. And in the neutral routes, whenever you wound Berdly, his arm isn't functioning. So, while it's clear that damage in the dark world does not one-to-one translate to the same damage in the real world, it's effective. His arm was ruined in the dark world, so his arm is ruined in the light world. It's just not physical. It's like for Naruto fans, Orochimaru's arms don't work because the soul of his arms got cut off or whatever. Some stupid nonsense. It's a similar concept here, I think. And with that in mind, I think it's just explicitly canon. So, do I feel anything strongly about it? Yes, I think it's good. Yeah, it's like A tier. Like, Berdly being actually freaking dead, I think is great. I think the idea that he's dead, and then, like, in future chapters, they might hint at it by being like, oh yeah, there was dust. There's a big pile of dust in the... like, because Kris stole a bunch of the stuff in the computer lab to take to the hometown. So someone be like, yeah, someone stole a bunch of computer lab stuff. Also, there was dust everywhere. Like, like there's nothing, or like there was nothing left in there but dust, like that would be absolutely something that I would love to see. That would be a great revelation. It's not like S tier, like it's going to extremely improve the plot, but I think it would be great. I think it'd be really good. Next is Chapter 3 Secret Boss is Flowey. This is the idea that since Toriel flew through Asgore's flowers in the trash can, and since Asgore has been it's implied that Asgore's been sending her flowers for a while, and she keeps throwing them out. This is the idea that once the Dreamer household gets turned into a dark world, it's going to turn the flowers into a Flowey-like entity, who is then going to be the secret boss. I think that's a cute idea. And then, like, if you, like, I'm imagining, like, its boss fight being, like, it has a bunch of different flower heads that are, it's like a Hydra, where it has a bunch of different colored heads, or like Tiamat from Dungeons and Dragons, and like each head is a different colored flower, and then if you did the little side quest to give Toriel flowers in Chapter 1, then when you actually fight the secret boss, it now has an extra head. So, like, I would love that. I would absolutely be on board for that concept, because something Half-Bred Chaos suggested in one of their more recent videos was the possibility that Deltarune is going to have a huge amount of variety in terms of how the world develops, specifically in the Dark World, but just in general, because there's all this data that's being stored in the code of Deltarune, where it's like it's keeping track of all sorts of specific things, some very niche things, when it doesn't need to. And it almost feels like Toby Fox is planning for there to be a huge amount of branching paths that you can go down to alter the game state of the Deltarune world and make the hometown really different, or make the overworld different. And I love that idea. I don't think that made it onto this theory list, but if it had, it'd be S tier. I love the idea that Undertale is the game where you kind of only really have one path, and it results in countless endings, whereas Deltarune is the game that only has one ending, but it can be reached through dozens of different paths, like where the world itself is drastically different depending on your actions. I adore that idea. I don't know if Toby Fox will actually do it, but it's an S tier concept. I would lose my mind if Toby actually went that route. So this being an extension of that, where something as minute as giving flowers alters a secret boss and makes it to where they behave differently, or have different dialogue, or reveal different secrets. I love that idea. How much of that should be attributed to Flowey as a secret boss concept, I'm not sure. I don't think I can give too much credit to the idea of, it differs depending on your actions, because I think that's giving credit to Half-Bred Chaos's theory rather than to this theory. So I think I'm just going to put this in B tier. I like it. I think it has the potential to be even better. And keep in mind, this is just how much I like the idea now, not how much I'll like the idea if Toby Fox actually does it. Like I said, this I feel neutral on, because I don't feel much right now for Jeff or Chara. But if Toby Fox really delves into them and gives them characters, I'm sure I'm going to adore them. My favorite character from Undertale is Flowey. Flowey is the GOAT. Chara is the Flowey before Flowey. The fallen child, anyway. It's a mouthful to say fallen child, so I'm just going to say Chara. I know. But it's, it's, the fan base mostly acknowledges them as Chara anyway. Point is, this could be S tier once it's actually brought to life. I just right now feel neutral on it. Similar thing with the Flowey thing, where it could be an S tier reality once it comes to life. But for now, I only feel vaguely positive. I like it. I don't love it. Next is chess theory. Probably one of the most famous theories in Deltarune, in the Deltarune community. This is the idea and I'm paraphrasing, I'm going to oversimplify probably, but it's the idea in chess how each chess piece has a specific value. And we are going from most value to least value and down the piece line. And the most valuable, and all of these chess pieces represent a future boss fight, where first we fought the king, who has infinite value in chess, in the form of the literal king. And he, quote-unquote, imitates the behavior of a king because he only moves really slowly and he never leaves his main spot, and he blah, blah, blah. And then queen represents a queen. She has some point value, and she embodies a queen in chess because she can move all over the place, and she's appearing all over the place during chapter 2. And yeah, and so the theory progresses like that, and it's the idea that we can predict some future bosses based off chess pieces. And like the knight, the roaring knight, will obviously represent a knight in chess. And then a pawn will be potentially the final boss, which is people thinking, oh, maybe it's Kris, or maybe it's, the vessel or something, some pawn in other people's games or whatever. I might be remembering this theory a little incorrectly, so I'm going to pull it up in another tab and just kind of watch it a little, just to make sure I'm judging it properly. Okay, yeah, he goes a lot deeper into the chess theory and like the specifics, like on Noelle being a pawn who gets upgraded to a knight and a bunch of other stuff. I have mixed feelings on chess theory, I'm going to be honest. Kudos to the guy who came up with it, Asriel. Yeah, I apologize, I probably butchered your name. But the theory is brilliant. Like, it's very clever how you piece together all this stuff. I'm kind of divided on whether I think it's intentional or not. Like, so on the one hand, I'm like, oh, wow, that's a lot of evidence that kind of supports the concept. However, it's, like, one detail that has always kind of bugged me was the egg. And how, that translates to hands and wingdings, and the hands mimic a knight movement, and like, that always felt like a stretch. Like, that always felt like, okay, was that intentional or was that luck? Like, I guess another way of putting it is, if the wingdings symbols had been shuffled around, would we have found some other word and been like, oh, this mimics the chess movement? I don't know. I have my doubts on this theory. I'm not entirely sold on it being true. It's very clever in its execution and the concept. I think, and it's a fun metaphor, be like, oh, the characters are pieces in someone else's game, and it's like, that's a fine storytelling device as well. The issue, I reckon, is that if you're going to have specific characters, like, for example, the idea seems to be that king, queen, the bosses of the round of the chapters are all on one side, working towards Dark Fountains. But then who are the secret bosses? Who do they represent? Which side are they on? And if the knight, the roaring knight, is working for someone or something, and that represents a player, but like, does it represent a player? I guess it would have to. So, like, maybe the angel. Maybe the angel from the Possibly is the one who the knight is working for. And that's one side. Okay. Then all the heroes would have to be on the other side. Susie is a dark knight. So maybe she's one of the good guy knights, or at least this side knights. Kris is the leader. Maybe Kris is the king piece. Ralsei may be a bishop. Like, it starts to get stretched when you're trying to figure out who these pieces represent on the other side. Like, one side, sure, you've got enough to make the pieces, but what about the others? So it gets a little confusing in that regard. And I guess you would argue that Jeff is the one playing the game. Or maybe Jeff's off to the side and isn't playing the game, and the player is one of the players of chess. I don't know. Thing is, I'm a big fan of Toby Fox's writing style, and I love the way that he frames everything. And chess theory has just never quite clicked for me. It's never felt like Toby Fox. it feels like they took a bunch of things and added them together, and they aren't actually intended to be working together, if that makes sense. I'm not sure. I'm sincerely not certain. It could be true, and I'm just not piecing it together. Like, maybe Asgore is the king of the good guy side, and then Toriel's the queen. Like, maybe the other Lightners represent... Maybe the Lightners are one side of the board, and the Darkners are the other side of the board. That's an idea. And that would work with the whole white chess pieces and black chess pieces. But one issue with that whole metaphor is that we already captured King. We captured King at the start of the game. So I feel like that's one step in the chess metaphor that kind of falls apart. When you've already captured the king, the game's over. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like chess theory has enough evidence. I think it's presented really well and cleverly, but on inspection, I'm not sure it really makes a ton of sense. I feel vaguely negatively about chess theory. But do I feel negative because I don't think it's true? Or do I feel negative because I think it would be bad if it's true? I don't think it would be bad if it's true. Yeah, I'm going to leave it in C tier. Like, I don't think it's true, but I don't think it would be the end of the world if it was true. I think Toby could make it really cool and interesting. I think the elements of the light and darkness, the kings and queens and knights and stuff, there's enough here that Toby could totally work this in. And it would be cool. I just don't think that's the direction it's going right now. I could be wrong, of course, but I don't believe in it, and I kind of dislike it. But I don't dislike it. I don't think it's true, and there's a difference. You can think something's wrong and think it's cool. I'm neutral on this. I don't think it's true. Next is choice between Noelle and Ralsei. This is vague, but it's the idea that at some point in the future, in like chapter 6 or something, we're going to have to choose a path to go down. And it will either be the path of Noelle and her snowgrave and glitches or something like that, or a path involving Ralsei. And we had to like choose between our party members. And we're going with one and leaving the other behind, and they'll become an enemy or something like that. This actually came up multiple times, but different people had different versions of it. So I'm not entirely sure where this theory originates from. I like the idea of having choice. The idea of specifically this choice doesn't make me feel much of anything, so I'm just going to leave it in C tier. I'm neutral. I don't really care one way or the other. A Dark World in the Church. Definitely at least B tier. Toby Fox has always had an interesting approach to religion in these games, and I would love to see him expand upon that. Like, just even the individual Darkners in a church dark world would be commentary on religion in some way, shape, or form, and I think that would be fascinating to analyze. So, and the fact that I think the Roaring Knight is Oberon, and I think that's all tied up with Alvin, who's a priest. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff here, and this would all tie into the Angel. I would love for the Dark World in a church to be a thing. This gets a thumbs up from me. Next is Dark Worlds equal D&D. This is one of the oldest theories in the community. This was really popular. This hit its peak back when we just had the Chapter 1 demo. Matt Pat even did a theory where he basically concluded that that's what was happening. I never liked this. For history on Jaru taste, I watched Bridge to Terabithia thinking I was watching something like Narnia, and when I found out it's just kids and having fantasies together, I hated it. I felt betrayed. If I sign up for a magical fantasy adventure, there better be a dang magical fantasy adventure. If it turns out, it was all just a dream, or it was all in their heads, or it was all just pretend, make-believe, woo, F tier. F tier. I would hate that with a passion. Absolutely terrible. I don't even think Toby Fox... theories like this are theories where if it turns out to be true, Toby Fox would have to work really hard to get me to feel neutrally. And I'm probably never going to like it. maybe Toby Fox could get it to B tier, but it's pretty low. I hate this. Yeah, not a fan. And once Chapter 2 came out, it became pretty dubious, to put it lightly, that this is true. Dark worlds are parallel to Undertale areas. This is the idea that the individual dark worlds represent specific areas in Undertale. Specifically, I think it was in reverse order, with the idea, I think, being that Asgore's place, New Home, represented the Card Kingdom, and then the core is represented by the Cyber World, and then I think Chapter 3's Dark World is going to be represented by Metaton's Hotel, or maybe something like that. Here, let me look up this theory again just to refresh myself on it. Okay, yeah, and like this theory also is built on the idea of how like the secret bosses represent the genocide bosses, with Sans and Jevil being parallels, while Metaton Neo and Spamton Neo are parallels. Something like that. I think this is a stretch. I'm going to be honest. I'm not opposed to it. I think it's a stretch. I think these stories definitely parallel each other, because that's literally how it's written. I don't know if this specifically is intentional. I think that part might be a little bit dubious, but I'm fairly neutral on this. I don't object to this theory. I don't necessarily believe it, but I wouldn't be opposed if it came out to be true. Darkners are objects brought to life. This deserves to be in its own tier. That's just obviously, like, it's just facts, just statements of truth. But yeah, this was a theory that I watched a whole theory video that this was the conclusion of, and I was like, I mean, I agree. I'm not sure this even counts as a theory anymore, but I mean, it is true. I guess I'll rank this based off of how much I like the idea of objects brought to life. I think it's great. I like the idea that Darkners are these objects brought to life, and that their personalities and abilities are defined in part by what they were in the light world, and perhaps in part by the history of the objects. Darkners still have a bit of mystery around them, so it's not entirely clear, but I think in general, I like this. I think it's a great concept that has a lot of versatility. So, overall, positive thumbs up from me. I have nothing negative to say on that one. Next is Deltarune Asriel made Undertale on his PC. So this is the idea that the video game that Asriel hasn't finished, which you can find on his PC, is Undertale, and that Undertale is a world within a world where Undertale only exists as a video game in the world. Let me just put it down here real quick. I don't like this theory at all. The idea that Undertale doesn't matter at all because it was just a video game in the world of Deltarune, that's kind of a huge insult to Undertale. I would hate that. And Toby said that like nothing we do in Deltarune will affect Undertale, but I feel like revealing that none of it mattered because it was all a video game. I mean, and I know some people are like, well, Deltarune, Undertale's already a video game, so it already doesn't matter. Shut up. That's not my point. My point is that by reducing it to being just a fantasy, even within a fantasy, that automatically undermines it to some extent. It basically makes, and since Asriel would be basing the characters in his game off of the people he knows in real life, it just becomes fan fiction. I do recontextualizing Undertale as cringe fan fiction of his real life friends and family is not something I'm fond of. I oppose this entirely. For those who are curious, I think Asriel came up with this in part. I think it's people have it backwards. I don't think this is referencing Undertale. I think Undertale is referencing Deltarune, in that Asriel has always dreamed of himself having this like crazy winged super form. And in Undertale, this manifests as becoming Flowey's final form, whereas in Deltarune, it manifests in the form of Asriel making a video game featuring the character. So I don't think it goes any deeper than that. This theory sucks. I hate this theory. It might be true. Again, to be clear, this is not me ranking based on how true it is, but I would hate it if it turned out to be true. Deltarune is an Undertale prequel. It has been confirmed that these are in different worlds, so whether this can even be acknowledged as possible anymore is dubious. I do agree that certain characters, like I have theorized myself that Sans is from Deltarune and he goes to Undertale and then his life proceeds from there. So I do think Deltarune is a prequel for Sans, but I do not think these exist in the same world and one occurs after the other. Like I don't think after Deltarune ends, Undertale begins in the same setting. I think these are different universes. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure this is arguing that Deltarune immediately leads into Undertale, and I don't agree with that. I think that's not true. And I also don't think it would be good if it was true, because it would kind of betray... I don't know, it would be kind of a betrayal. Well, actually, it would literally be a betrayal, because it would be Toby Fox saying, oh, they're in different worlds, and then being like, psyched, pranked, I lied. Any theory that requires Toby Fox to have lied to us, I think gets F tier for me by default. I do not feel enough negative emotions in my heart for me to put this in F tier, actually. I'm putting it back in D tier. I hate these. I feel hatred. I don't feel hatred for this. I dislike it greatly, though. Well, I don't even dislike it greatly. I just dislike it. Deltarune is an alternate universe to Undertale. I think this is just canon. But I'll just go ahead and put it up here with Darkners or Objects Brought to Life, where it's like, I think the premise of this being a parallel story to Undertale has a ton of narrative potential and a ton of emotional potential and thematic potential. I think this is a brilliant idea. I love this entirely. I used to think Undertale and Deltarune were parallel timelines or alternate timelines, but now I think parallel worlds just makes more sense. Deltarune is Gaster's Undertale fanfiction by Misty Sparkles. So, yeah, Misty Sparkles had a video where she listed a couple theories, and 2 of them made it into this tier list. I don't remember my reason for only including 2, because I think it was 3 theories. I think one of her theories was already included on the tier list, and that's why I only included 2. The point is, the idea that if it was revealed that Deltarune is nothing more than Gaster from Undertale's fanfiction, this is like lower than F tier. I mean, to be fair to Misty Sparkles, she was memeing hardcore when she suggested this. Yeah, sorry about that. I was just looking up what Misty Sparkles' pronouns were, and unfortunately I couldn't find any information on that. Apologies to Misty Sparkles if I misgendered them. But yeah, this is, I'm pretty sure, a meme theory. I don't have any strong opinions on it. Or no, I do have a strong opinion. It's awful. It's F tier. But I think that's not terribly... I would be very upset by it, but it's a meme. I don't think Misty Sparkles would be too upset by that. We'll see more of Misty Sparkles in a little bit. Next, we have one from BanditGames, which is Deltarune is Undertale Genocide sequel. I forget the specifics of this theory, so I'm going to have to go watch the video again. Give me one moment. Okay, yeah. It's just the idea that after Undertale Genocide, Chara used the power of Kris, of the soul that they got from Kris, to become Kris, and the story continues, and Undertale is a Deltarune sequel. Or Deltarune is an Undertale sequel, or whatever I said. I don't like it. Toby Fox said they're different worlds, so this is another case of he kind of had to be lying a bit. I mean, don't get me wrong, BanditGames addresses that in the video, but I still don't like it. I don't know if I hate it. I don't hate it. I do dislike it, though. I think having the two be just a sequel or a prequel, I feel very similarly, where I feel like it's just not very interesting. I like them being parallel. I do not like them being one after the other, because I feel like that undermines it to a degree, the concept of them being parallel stories. So, yeah. Not a huge fan of that theory. Could be better. I don't know. It's clever. Kudos to BanditGames. The theory is pretty decently constructed. I just disagree with it. And don't like the connotations of it. Next is Deltarune Papyrus is an asocial incel. This may seem kind of random, but this is actually in reference to Toby Fox's rough drafts, or rather his concept art, which he showed, where Papyrus was originally meant to have this sort of asocial incel kind of personality. But then he decided to go with a different personality for Papyrus. This is the theory that in Deltarune, Papyrus actually has that personality. That sounds like a really obnoxious personality to have, and I wouldn't be too interested in seeing it. But Toby Fox could make this interesting. Like, if it was portrayed in a very, sympathetic light instead of the way that you would expect. Like, if they try to make it clear that, Papyrus isn't a bad person for having this personality, I could see that being engaging. Like, I think he could rescue this idea. But fundamentally, the idea of Papyrus being this I don't like it. It gives me bad vibes. And if it just exists to dunk on this kind of person, that would be really mean-spirited. And I would not be too fond of it. Yeah, I'm not going to say it's full F tier, because Toby Fox could spin it in a positive light, but I'm not a fan of this potential storyline, personally. Gas leak theory. This is the theory that when Kris stabs the ground and creates a dark fountain at the end of Chapter 2, they did not actually create a magical portal to another dimension to create a dark world. Instead, they hit a gas line. That's what it is. So like a pipe under the floor with gas in it. And when Kris stabbed it, the gas and smoke, it was like an explosion, but with gas and smoke, and I think this is like the dying remnants of the Dark Worlds or D&D theory, where it's like, maybe that's not magic. Maybe it's fumes and they're hallucinating. Yeah. F tier. Some people have argued that it's a meme theory and no one actually thinks this. I don't know if that's true, but I personally think it's really bad. I think it would be really, really, really dumb if this turned out to be true. I don't know how Toby Fox could rescue this unless they went hardcore on having Kris be mentally ill, where they're actually hallucinating, like the things that they see, like if the world of Deltarune that we're seeing is being warped by Kris's perception and things they think are happening aren't actually happening. But even then, even if Toby Fox did that, I hate that twist. Where it's like, oh, you were crazy the whole time. I hate that twist. So there's really no positive way to spin this. I think this is a C or D tier trope, even when Toby Fox gives it all his might. And this is F tier as a whole. Yeah, not a fan. Alright, next up we have Gaster drove Jevil mad. This is the theory that Jevil used to be functional and then became crazy because of Gaster. Again, this is kind of up here with these other theories that are like, yes, I agree. I don't really even consider them theories at this point. I think it's just explicitly the canon. So, yeah, I mean, the whole idea... And I guess we'll bring up Spamton while we're at it, because this is also a separate theory. But I do agree that these are the same deal, in that Gaster interacted with them, or rather, Jeff interacted with them, and it drove them mad. And by drove them mad, I don't agree that they're actually insane. I actually think Jevil is more mentally stable than Spamton is. I think Jevil is a nihilist and a sadist. Not a sadist, oh, what's it called when someone lives purely for pleasure? Hedonist. That's the word. I think Jevil's a hedonist and a nihilist, but I don't think he's crazy. Spamton is severely mentally ill. And I think part of the blame can be put for their effort. But the thing is, Spamton's mental illness is more to do with everyone else in his life. And Jevil's... But it's... How do I put this? I blame Gaster for their philosophies. Or rather, I blame Jeff, to be more precise, for their philosophies. I don't blame Jeff for their particular mental illnesses. I think those are more consequence of other factors in their life. But I digress. I agree that these, like, Jeff showed up, messed with these people, and that's why they are the way they are. I think that's just canon. I think the idea of using these secret bosses and having them interact with the truth via Jeff, and then having, that truth drive them to extreme philosophical places is great. I like it. I think it's very cool and very interesting. Not much more to say on it. Next is Gaster is central to the plot. So at this point, this is a bit of a divisive theory because a lot of people, while you kind of have to accept that Gaster is involved in Deltarune in some way, it's extremely unclear at this point how much and in what way. Some people still think Jeff is going to be, or rather, Gaster. I will refer to him as, I will refer to the intro man and all the things connected to intro man as Jeff. Gaster, though, is, even though they might be one and the same, we don't know. So, the idea that Gaster, the mad scientist, is involved with the plot and is central to the plot and is like the main antagonist is an idea that not everyone agrees with. Some people think he'll still be a minor character, like as minor as Sans was in Undertale. And I've actually only very recently reached an opinion on this. Namely, it wasn't until the Gaster Files, when I fully analyzed those audio tracks, that I realized I full-heartedly believe that, at the very least, the entity known as Jeff is going to be the main antagonist. I don't know if Jeff is Gaster, but Jeff is absolutely, in my opinion, the main antagonist of Deltarune. It's possible that the main antagonist may be a duo between Jeff and Chara, but at the very least, Jeff is one of the main antagonists. Now, not everyone agrees with that sentiment, and even if you do agree with it, that raises an important question. Do I like the idea that Jeff, or rather Gaster, is going to be the main antagonist? I don't know how to feel about it, honestly, because on the one hand, it enables a lot of very interesting elements, but on the other, we don't know anything about Gaster. We don't know anything about his personality. With Flowey, he had a very distinct and engaging personality. Like that, Undertale is Flowey, as far as I'm concerned. Do I think Gaster is going to be an interesting enough character to enjoy his core role in the plot? I don't know. And so I'm going to go ahead and leave this in C tier, because I really don't know if I'm happy about Gaster being integral to the plot of Deltarune. I'm uncertain. I really need to know more about him. Like, if Gaster ends up being kind of a bland mad scientist character, this is going to fall pretty far. But if he ends up being a really interesting and complex character, then it'll go high. It just depends on how it's executed. Next is Gaster made Deltarune. So this theory is working off the idea that Jeff is Gaster, and all the stuff we attribute to Jeff is him, and that it goes beyond Gaster being a meta entity who can interact with menus to the point of it's completely his invention. I agree that this is a possibility. Do I like that idea? No. Because this is basically another version of this kind of stuff where Deltarune and Undertale are one and the same. Because I'm pretty sure this is implying that Undertale Gaster made the Deltarune universe. And, like, it's on a computer or something. And I think that overlap is not interesting. I don't think I would like it as much as the idea of them being parallel universes. So, yeah, I think it would confuse the themes and confuse some story ideas, and it would just generally not be as interesting. And I don't think they've set it up enough for me to believe it. I don't believe this is to be true. And I also don't think it would be as interesting as what I already think it is, which is that it's an AU. So yeah, this one gets a D tier from me. Next is this is the other Misty Sparkles theory, which is the idea that Gaster split the universe into two separate realities, one which is Undertale, one which is Deltarune. This is basically a reimagining of this, but instead of Deltarune being like on a computer or whatever, it's Deltarune being its own reality, but the universe split because of the actions of Gaster. I think it's unnecessarily, like, shrinks the size of the narrative, because if you just say they're different universes, then you can be like, yeah, a multiverse. That's fun. But if you shrink it to, no, just these two universes exist, it kind of limits the storytelling. It kind of limits the world in a way that I wouldn't particularly enjoy. And it gives Gaster even more emphasis, and I don't want to give him emphasis. Like, don't get me wrong, I like the idea of Gaster, or rather, Jeff, being the main antagonist, but only because I like the idea of him playing catch-up to the Angel, where he's struggling against something, the same way that Asgore was struggling and Flowey was struggling. An entity who's just this god isn't interesting to me. Not just a god, but like a universe-creating, unstoppable god, mad science. I don't really like it. It goes in D tier for me. I don't like it. It could be done well. Not something I'm super interested in at this time. Gaster-themed battle remix by Andrew Cunningham. This is one of, if not the only, like, capital T theories on Andrew Cunningham's channel. He mostly just does analysis, which is great, don't get me wrong. In fact, he makes a whole big meme deal out of it, that when he does this theory where he's like, I know I mostly do, and yeah, that's definitely Andrew's voice. Oh god, I'm not going to disrespect the world by trying to do a Andrew impression. Point is, he's like, oh, I normally do analysis, so here's a theory. I don't know where it went. There it is. Basically arguing that World Revolving is a Gaster theme combat remix. Kind of like how, you know, I don't know, what's an example of this? Card Castle is the normal theme, and then Chaos King is the battle theme. You know, stuff like that. It's a common thing in Deltarune and Undertale. And basically arguing that the freedom theme, as we've come to know it in the community, the theme that's in both Jevil's theme and Spamton's theme, is actually all inherently built out of the Gaster theme, and Gaster's theme is basically what's going on. And I actually really like this idea. I think not only is it a cool concept and a fun idea, I think it is extremely interesting from a thematic standpoint to have Jevil be the one with the World Revolving, to be the one that is most aligned with Gaster, because Jevil is the hedonist. He's the one with no moral backbone. He is purely doing what he wants to. And the idea that Jevil and Gaster might have similar philosophies is interesting to me. I do think there's some limitations here. Like, I do like the idea of World Revolving being properly Jevil's theme. Like, I wouldn't want it to belong to someone else. But at the same time, I suppose, Spamton's theme pulls from a ton of sources. But that makes it better. So the idea that this arrangement of... If we imagine each leitmotif as like an idea, or a theme, or a concept, Jevil's is the specific arrangement of those ideas. Whereas the true Gaster theme battle remix, if it were to occur, would be slightly different from this. It would have a different composition. It wouldn't feel the same. So, same thing with Spamton. Where, like, if we ever fought Metaton Neo in the Deltarune world, it would have a totally different song. And I mean, I guess we have fought Metaton Neo in the Undertale world, and it was a different song. if you can call it a song. Point is, I think this is a fun idea. Is it A tier? Do I like it that much? Sure. I think it's like a low A tier. I think the idea that these are leeching off of some of the, not only the musical ideas of Gaster, but also the philosophies of Gaster, I think that's a fun enough concept to be worthy of A tier. So kudos, Andrew. I can't wait. You should totally do a stream of your own where you rank some of these theories, Andrew. I think that would be a fun time. I'd watch it at least. Oh, and in case I didn't say it at the start, I will be linking this tier list template in the description down below. So if you want to make your own, that's the place to do it. Next is Gaster versus Chara by SwankyBox. This is the idea that the two factions at play in Deltarune are Gaster and Chara, one representing evil order and one representing evil chaos. Where we're caught in between them, where Gaster's order and Chara's chaos are both bad, but, you know, they're the main competitors between the two. Like, those are the two at war with one another. Any theory based around, oh, Chara the demon, edgelord supreme, is coming to kick your butt in Deltarune gets a solid D tier from me. I just full frontal, what am I saying? Full transparency, I hate any theory based around Chara from Undertale coming to Deltarune and being like, ooga booga booga, it's me, the demon Chara. I've come to be evil and villainous. It's like, that does not interest me in the slightest. I think it's dorky, to be honest. Next is Grand Fountain made Ralsei special. So this is the idea that Ralsei's special properties come from the fact that he is from the Grand Fountain, which is different from other dark fountains. It's made of pure darkness and is uber duper powerful, and that's why Ralsei is special. Sure. I think it's kind of boring. I mean, I'm sure Toby Fox can make it fun and interesting, but like, oh, Ralsei is special because he came from a special place. And the special place is special because it's big. It's like, the Dark Fountain is chunkier. It's like, that's... He's made from chunky salsa instead of regular salsa. It's like, okay, cool, whatever. I don't find it interesting. It's not a bad theory or anything. It's just not interesting to me. Ice E Theory by Half-Bred Chaos. This one was... Oh, God, I barely remember. There's so much to it, I think. Let me pull it up. I'm going to have to watch it again to remind myself. Okay, yeah. Watch the video. It was wow. It was like a Jaru level theory. Like, kudos, HBC. You blew it out of the park. Blew it out of the park? I am bad at English. Okay, it's pretty... So it's like... It's the theory that there is an icy monster stalking the town and that Kris has been trying to protect people from it, and that it was what scared off the wet-nosed bandits, and it's stuff like that, and I love it. It's at least A tier. It's completely unhinged, and I am 100% on board for it. Yeah, I'm tempted to go S tier, but I don't think it quite has that potency. It's definitely A tier. I love it. It's hilarious. Just like all the little bits of evidence for Icy. Don't get me wrong, I 100% agree that there is something sus going on with Icy, and I think we're going to be delving into that over the course of the story. I don't know what we're going to learn, but it's sus for certain. Beyond whether it's specifically what HBC is suggesting, I don't know, but I love this option regardless. Alright, let's try and pick up the pace a little. Intros to chapters are flashbacks. This is specifically how in... Okay, so at the start of the chapter, we have the intro, the vessel creation, then we have the voice saying, oh, you can't choose who you are in this world, and then there's actually some cut dialogue that wasn't actually shown, where Susie says is trying to tell Kris to wake up. So, and then in chapter 2, we have Toriel being like, oh, is this your knife? Oh, no! And it's the theory that, like, all of that stuff is all flashbacks to previous events. And that, like, you know, intro with the Vessel Goner creation, and Kris being caught with a knife and Toriel freaking out is both stuff that happened in the past. I respect this theory a lot. Obviously, I went a step further in my Gaster files, where I went, it's the intro to chapter 1 with the Goner Maker is actually the future, but I'm glad at least some folks are on the same page as me and are like, these intros are sus. There's something going on there. And specifically, I love the idea that this theory ties into this theory, where the knife Kris is caught with, like, it's presented as being this harmless thing, like, oh, Toriel's reacting to the pie being eaten, oh no. And I am much more interested in the possibility that there was an incident in the past where Toriel caught Kris with a bloody knife and freaked out. And that's just so dramatic and awesome, and I love it. Specifically, the idea that maybe it was covered in Kris's blood, perhaps through self-harm of some kind, is an idea that I also find highly compelling. So that's kind of a sub-theory within this theory. So I don't think I can probably, and I partially disagree with the intro to the chapter 1 being a flashback, but the idea in general is something I'm totally on board with. Yeah, this is another A tier for me. I really like it. Yeah, very interesting indeed. I like how with all the night theories, it's night equals night equals night equals night equals night, night and night equals Kris. It's like, haha, you've been pranked. It was Kris all along. All right, these are pretty straightforward. This is just theories about the identity of the Roaring Knight. Let's get through it. Alvin, A tier. I think it's high. I think I arrived at pretty much the Oberon Smog conclusion through a lot of evidence that could be interpreted as instead being Knight, Alvin. So I think that's absolutely A tier. It being the annoying dog, F tier. Undermines a lot of the drama and the stakes, and I wouldn't like it. Knight being Des. A bit confused thematically. And I think Des being the character in the code's a lot more interesting, or Des being dead, or Des just not being in the narrative. I think there's a lot of ways to make Des interesting. I'm not sure Knight is one of them. I don't think it'd be interesting enough for me personally. Like, Buglarka is a fan artist friend of mine, and they have made art, or they've done comics where there was like a darker version of Des, and I like the idea of like that. The reason I bring it up is that I found that even more like as pretty compelling. But like, if we were going to have a Des in the dark world doing stuff, I'd rather it be kind of like the Ralsei Asriel thing, where there's a dark Des of some sort, and have them do stuff, rather than it being Des herself. So as a whole, I'm not really a fan of this theory. I kind of dislike it. Knight is Kris, F tier. I think this is the most, like, to this, it's funny, my Who is the Roaring Knight video is my most popular by a mile. It pulls in like 20,000 views a month still. It boggles my mind. I kind of can't watch that video myself. The audio triggers me. But it's a hugely popular video. People are constantly watching it. And what that means is that I'm constantly getting comments from people who think they are very clever, who are like, maybe the Knight is just Kris, saved you 3 hours of time. And it's like, wow, you sure are original. It's like, yes, I get it. I understand that Kris created a dark fountain. Cool. Berdly almost created a dark fountain too. Noelle was pressured into making a dark fountain. Do you think Kris successfully making a dark fountain makes them the Roaring Knight? No. I think that's the most yeah, I don't know. There's surface level plot, and this feels like people falling for the surface level plot hook, line, and sinker. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to say about it. I think that this is boring and isn't interesting and is just wrong. I think there's lots of options that point towards Kris not being the knight. I think there's a lot of evidence pointing towards Kris not being the knight, and I think there's a lot of narrative potential in various other characters being the knight who aren't Kris. I think this is lame. To be fair, this theory probably isn't as bad as I'm ranking it. It probably wouldn't upset me as much as I'm making it out to be. But every comment from people being like, maybe it's just a knight's crush and you don't have to watch the 3-hour video. Every time I've gotten that comment, my opinion of this theory has degraded. So yeah, F tier. Knight is the mayor. She's not a character. I'm putting it in D tier. Okay, you know what? I'll take Kris as the knight out of D tier, out of F tier. It's a D tier. I don't think it's interesting. It's not the knight is the annoying dog level. And just to be clear, I don't like this theory because I think it undermines all of the stakes in the plot in a horrific way, and I think it would be really cringe. I don't know, cringe isn't the right word, but it'd be very disappointing. But Kris being the knight wouldn't undermine everything. It would just be boring and wouldn't be as interesting as the alternatives. Knight is being the mayor, I think would also be boring because it's like, why have the main Asgore level antagonist of the story turn out to be a character we haven't even met? I mean, now that I say that, I suppose since I do believe the knight is meant to be the Asgore of this game, and we hear a lot about the mayor of Deltarune. Okay, there is some evidence for it. It's not an unbelievable theory, but I think it's just not compelling enough. I don't know. That's not fair. There's enough evidence and enough potential drama that it could be better than D tier. I think it's way less interesting than some of the alternatives, especially considering we haven't even met this character. It's a brand new one. Part of why my Oberon smog theory appeals to me is because we knew Gerson. But having a theory based around a character who we didn't even meet in Undertale, I mean, I get it. Some people be like, oh, that's what makes it cool. It's a new character. But it's like, what's the personality of the mayor? I don't know. I don't know. I'm biased. Obviously, everyone's biased. But, like, this is better than Kris because Kris is basic, and they're both better than annoying dogs that undermines everything. But I don't feel very strongly about the knight being the mayor. I just don't find the mayor very interesting as a character, so it's like, oh, strict mother character. I don't know. She just doesn't interest me. Knight being Papyrus. I don't like Papyrus as a character that much. I don't dislike him. Like, if I was ranking Papyrus in the tier list, I'd probably put him in C tier because I just don't really feel much about him. I think he's occasionally funny, and that's about it. That's the beginning and end. I don't find him interesting. I don't find his personality interesting. We haven't seen Papyrus, so I guess that's an argument for him being the knight. I just don't find it interesting. It's on the same level as the mayor, to be honest, where it's like, I don't really like it because I didn't really find Papyrus to be an interesting character, but it's counteracted by the fact that this would be trying to make him an interesting character. It's whatever. I'm putting it in C tier. I wouldn't be horrifically disappointed if it was Papyrus. Like, I wouldn't be Kris level disappointed, but I'm not fond of it. I acknowledge that there's pros to it and that it could be done well. I just don't personally find it very engaging. Knight is Ralsei. D tier. It's nonsensical. People would have recognized him, I think. And I don't know. There's just not enough. I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, if the knight being a character we've already met and it being like, oh, secretly Kris was doing it, or secretly Ralsei was doing it, it's not as interesting as it just being its own character. I prefer it be Mayor or Papyrus than these two because these two already exist. I'd rather we flesh out them and have a cool antagonist. I'd rather have both an interesting Frisk type character and an interesting Asgore type character, not them be the same. I feel like that's not as fun. So yeah, Knight being rules. This is the first theory that actually involves a Darkner, so that's different. Oh, I just remembered my whole spiel in my Who is the Roaring Knight thing where I was like, rules card, Roaring Knight, same initials? Yeah, alright, I'll put it in B tier. There's enough funny evidence that I think it would be amusing if it turned out to be true. Sure, why not? The Knight is the vessel. Boring. Oh, the vessel that we discarded, it got a will of its own, and now it's off doing stuff. I don't know. I haven't really figured out what I want the vessel to be. It doesn't deserve D tier. I'm so biased, because I did that Who is the Roaring Knight video, so I've already given my opinions on these characters. And my opinions on the Roaring Knight have kind of solidified over time, and so that makes these theories kind of awkward for me to recap, to revisit. The Knight being the vessel. The vessel isn't really a character, so I don't really feel strongly one way or another. Papyrus, Mayor, it's the same thing as the Mayor, really. Kris, and that's it for the Knight theories until we get to, like, Oberon Smog, but we'll discuss him later. Kris is a vessel. As in, he's literally created by Gaster, I guess. So I guess this is... Oh, did I just call Kris a he? My apologies. Kris is... they are a vessel. A vessel. A vassal? A vessel. I have no idea. The idea that they were made by Gaster, I guess, is the... Or, okay, not Gaster, Jeff. Because this is not... Gaster's not directly acknowledged. Whoever created the vessel in the intro also created Kris. That's the theory. I like Kris being a human. Like a regular born and bred human. Born and raised. Born and bred. God, I butcher everything. Yeah, I don't know. I don't... This doesn't really click with me. I'm not really of the opinion that Kris and Gaster have ever met. And I don't really think I would find it super interesting if they had. Yeah, I don't know. Not a big fan of that one. Kris is the Deltarune version of Chara. This was like the second video I ever did was where I argued that the top two likely candidates were that Kris is the Deltarune version of Chara or Kris is the Deltarune version of Frisk. And I basically concluded that Kris is Frisk. If Kris is Chara, then I would expect Frisk to be out in the world somewhere, and I just don't find Frisk to be interesting enough for that to be something I'd like to see. However, the idea of exploring Chara through Kris is absolutely a fun idea. Through Kris being their AU counterpart. So, while I don't think I would be super thrilled with it, I think there's more interesting possibilities. Do I think there's more interesting possibilities? Here's the thing. I think there's more interesting possibilities for Kris. I don't know if there's more interesting possibilities for Deltarune's version of Chara. So I think I'm actually going to go A tier. Yeah. Yeah, I actually think Kris being this universe's version of Chara is actually a pretty fun and interesting idea. I would not be opposed to it. I think it'd be pretty cool. Alright, I am halfway through. I'm going to take a break and then come back and finish recording later. Alright, took a short break there. Today is a second day of recording, and I'm ready to get back to ranking fan theories. I believe last time I ranked all the Knight theories, or most of them anyway. And next is Kris equals Frisk Deltarune. So this is working off the idea that there are duplicates of every character from Undertale in Deltarune. There's Undertale Toriel, there's Deltarune Toriel. There's Undertale Asgore, there's Deltarune Asgore. And, this theory holds, there's Deltarune Frisk and Deltarune... Or rather, there's Undertale Frisk and a Deltarune Frisk. And this theory argues that the Deltarune version of Frisk is the character we know as Kris. Pretty straightforward. This is actually a theory that I have made. That this is actually, I think, my second theory on my channel, was that Kris and Frisk is the Frisk of this world. I think the evidence is just really strong for it. And yeah, I think You remember how I said Kris is Deltarune Chara, and I liked that because it would give us the opportunity to understand Chara better as a character? Same goes with this. The difference is that I don't find Frisk to be as interesting of a character as... I say that. Actually, I take it back. Kris being Frisk is as good, if not better, than Kris being Chara. Because Chara is a cool, interesting figure, but we'll never get to see much more of them in Undertale. And, like, you know, what context could we get about Chara in Deltarune that would make their Undertale counterpart more interesting? Would make them more nuanced? I don't think there really is. We know Chara's deal. You know, they had a terrible life or some tragic nonsense in their backstory, and that made them hate humanity. And they climbed a mountain, potentially for mentally ill reasons, fell into the underground, were adopted by the Dreamers, came up with a plan to kill humanity, and then died. Like, that's their life. We know their life story, more or less. Like, we're missing some details, but we get the broad strokes. Learning more about their Deltarune counterpart, I don't think is likely to change much. Whereas Kris could give us opportunity to understand Frisk better. And that's something I find really intriguing. Because Frisk is never given really the opportunity to express themselves in Undertale. Like, there's a fair chunk of details that you can actually string together about Frisk. In fact, I might even be making a video about what we know about Frisk Undertale. But we don't have much confirmed. It's very open to interpretation. And in fact, a lot of people think Frisk just doesn't have a character, and that, oh, they're just a player stand-in. How they can do that when Kris exists is beyond me, but, you know, I think the whole point of Kris is to show that Frisk also had a personality. Frisk also had things that they desired and wanted, and they were just hijacked by the player. However, you know, people don't necessarily agree with that, apparently. Some people think it's okay to gender Frisk but not Kris, and I think there's just some inconsistency there in terms of their interpretation of the series. But I digress. So how do I rank this theory? I think this is great. I think this could give us a lot of insight into Frisk Undertale, and I think that's one of the most interesting elements left in Undertale. Like learning about Gaster or whatever, I mean, I guess that's interesting to a degree. But at the end of the day, it's like either he's evil and he just did this for power, or he was a good guy experimenting and it went wrong. Like, there's not a ton left for Gaster that I find particularly interesting. Whereas Frisk is really the last intriguing mystery of Undertale, in my opinion. So yeah, I really like this idea. I don't think it's quite S tier, but I do think it's A tier. I think it's a really fun concept. Next, we have Kris made Fountain for sympathetic reasons by Dorked. This was an awkward one to put into a text box, but TLDR, one of Dorked's theories was basically, I think this was like an amalgamation of two videos. Actually, I don't remember now. But one of their videos argued that Kris is doing everything that they're doing. They're creating dark worlds, they have red glowing eyes, they have a knife. They're doing all of this stuff for reasons that are completely sympathetic. Like, oh, they want friends, they want adventures, they want happiness, they want all these nice things. And that they are not evil. Stuff like that. And yeah, I agree. I mean, the alternative is Kris made them for unsympathetic reasons, and that's not interesting at all. Bad guy Kris is not a very compelling story. I'd prefer good guy Kris, or good person. Guy is gender neutral in my vocabulary, but no, I just I don't feel strongly about this. I mean, I think yeah, it would be more interesting and engaging for Kris to be a sympathetic character than for them to be an unsympathetic character. So yeah, B tier. I don't feel strongly about it, but I do agree that it would be good. Kris summoned the player, F. I'm not even going to elaborate further. I mean, well, I guess I should explain what the theory is, but there's different ways to interpret it. Kris summoned the player as part of the demon rituals that they studied. It's implied they've studied magic and demons and things like that. They studied it with Caddy. And the theory there's different versions of this theory. There's lots of sub-theories in these little like gas leak theory. Like, it's partially an independent theory, partially part of D&D theory. Like, there's sub elements to it, or the dark worlds equal D&D, and there's some people suggested a lot of theories that were like sub theories of broader ideas. Like, people had very specific ideas of what it means for Papyrus to be the knight and why he's doing what he's doing, but it all was sprouting from the core concept of knight equals Papyrus. Similar deal here. There's different versions of why Kris summoned the player, or whether it was intentional, or whether it was an accident. But long story short, they summoned the player, now they're possessed, and in some versions of the theory, Kris is happy about this. This was their goal. In some versions, they're unhappy about it, and they're trying to get their freedom back. I have no strong opinions on it. Well, no, I do have a strong opinion about it, which is that it's F tier, because I don't like player theories. It's like this. I just don't like it being part of the narrative. I don't think it's true, and I also don't think it's interesting in the context of Toby Fox's writing. People don't seem to understand that when I say, oh, I don't like the player stuff, it's not that I don't like meta content. It's not that I can't understand how a video game can be very engaging and emotional and compelling and be very meta and have the player be an integral part of the narrative. I understand. However, I don't think that's what Toby Fox is doing. I also don't think that's ever been anything he was doing. I think people overemphasize the player's importance in these stories. I think stories are about fictional characters with a meta-narrative. And that's a big difference between having a player part of the actual narrative. So yeah, and I know I get it. Like, oh, Never-Ending Story. You didn't watch Never-Ending Story when you were a kid. It's like, yes, I did. I watched Never-Ending Story. I watched lots of stories and movies and books and games that had very, like, ooh, the player's part of the world. Like, yeah, like I haven't played some of the more popular ones lately, like One Shot or any of those things. But I'm sure if I did, I'd enjoy them greatly. But the thing is, if the player actually is an integral part of the plot, then the fact that it is being integrated so vaguely that you can actually interpret it as the player not being part of the plot means that I think that this is a bad idea, and the player being part of the plot theories. Because, how do I put this? I think it has been too vague regarding whether the player is part of the story, and if you want, and while it's very cool and interesting to have the player be part of the narrative and have that be a compelling part, I think you need to be extremely clear that that's what the kind of story you're trying to tell. Like in the Stanley Parable, it's like the player is part of the narrative, and they're very upfront about that. It's a very meta game, and that's part of what makes it fun. If the Stanley Parable hid that fact until like the final ending or something, that wouldn't make it cool. It would make it like kind of incompetent. It would make it nonsensical. And that's kind of my attitude about the player being part of the plot in Undertale or Deltarune. It's like, if it's true, then it was done poorly. Which is why I don't think it's true. Because I trust Toby Fox's writing. I don't think Toby would write a story heavily focused on this super meta concept of the player being part of the plot, and then make it so poorly communicated that someone like me could unironically believe that the player has little to no role in the narrative. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. It's not that I don't think it could be done well. I think it's been done well many times. I think it's been done fantastically. I just don't think it's what Toby is doing here. And if he is doing it here, then I think he's doing it poorly. And I'd rather believe that he's not doing it and is doing a good job than to believe he is doing it and doing a poor job. So, that's my opinion on the matter. Next is memory heads referred to Deltarune. Now, memory heads refer to Deltarune. This is in reference to how, if you squint, some of the faces on the memory head enemies in the True Lab of Undertale kind of look like the boss faces of the secret bosses in Deltarune, like Spamton and Jevil and such. Maybe. Could be. I don't know. I feel very neutral. It's like, if it's true, it's like, neat. More evidence of Gaster slash Sans having contact with the Deltarune reality. It's like, cool. I'm glad to see it. I mean, I already believe that's the case, but if that was true with this, cool. I'm not very passionate about this theory because it's kind of vague, and it's like we're probably never going to get confirmation that it's the case, even if it is true, and it wouldn't add a ton anyway. So I don't know. I don't feel strongly because I can't really see how this would add to the narrative in any super meaningful way, but it's a neat detail if true. Naked Ralsei theory. This is quite the little meme. Don't worry, Andrew. We got your favorite theory in. So for those curious, Naked Ralsei theory is the theory that every chapter Ralsei is going to remove an article of clothing. At the end of chapter 1, he removed his hat, and at the end of chapter 2, well, at least for a moment, he removed his glasses when you go to the Spamton Neo area. So the theory goes that this trend will continue, and we will see more and more of Ralsei as the plot goes on. It's a total meme. It's an absolute guffaw. Guffaw? Is that a word? I don't know if it is a word, but you know what? I just invented a word. If Shakespeare can do it, I can do it too, you know? So, yeah. I mean, do I think the story would be better with it? I think it would. It's never going to be a major thing, but I think it's really funny. And if the theorists who propose this are correct, then this is an absolute meme and a half, and I would be very amused. Like if Ralsei takes off his scarf at some point in the chapter 3, then I'm going to lose my mind and just be like, oh my god, Naked Ralsei theory is real. Let me make sure I'm still recording. I am. Huzzah. Okay. Yeah, so this is a B tier. I'm vaguely positive on it. I think it would be funny. I doubt it's true, but I think if it was true, it'd be kind of really funny. I don't know, it'd be hilarious. I'm just imagining the final form secret Ralsei super boss where he removes his skin and becomes his true dark form, and you fight a demonic abomination that only vaguely resembles a goat. See, I just turned this super silly meme theory into something terrifying. You're welcome. Next, we have Nera Chara. This is the theory. Well, you should be familiar with this theory, or well, if you are familiar with this theory at all, you're familiar with it in the context of Undertale. This is not that theory. This is the theory that the Chara is the narrator of the Deltarune world game setting as well. Andrew Cunningham did a whole video basically showing that if this is the case, it doesn't work nearly as well as it did in Undertale. It's not being done very clearly and effectively. If that is the true narrative thing going on, that the narrator is Chara, and I'm inclined to agree with him. Would I like it if Chara was the narrator? Here's the thing. In Undertale, it made sense to have Chara as the narrator because it's implied that they're, in some vague way, with Kris. They are, if not possessing them, then they are attached to their being in some way. Their spirit lingers around, their ghost lingers around Kris, or not Kris, Frisk in Undertale. And that concept is, and, you know, having it be like, oh, it's Chara narrating what Frisk does, that's a fun enough idea. And, you know, since ghosts can defy the will of Asriel as a god, then having this be true and him not realize that there's ghosts is kind of interesting. I don't know. There's interesting elements to it in Undertale. But in Deltarune, I don't really think it works as well because I don't think Chara is in the same role as they were in Undertale. They're not the dead ghost. I think Asriel's the dead ghost. So if anything, I'm a Nera Asriel stan rather than a Nera Chara stan at this stage of the theory crafting. So yeah, I like if it was true, I'd be kind of like whatever. I wouldn't be super into it, honestly. It's kind of a D tier for me, specifically in the context of Deltarune, not the Undertale version. Undertale version's fine. Noelle attacked Darkners at start. This is the theory that how at the start of chapter 2. We find Noelle surrounded by craters, and we pass a bunch of Darkners who are terrified of some woman, and it really doesn't make sense for them to be terrified of Queen. because why would they? No one else in the underground is terrified of Queen. Like, they think she's a little annoying. Like, they think they're being oppressed. But, like, the Sweet Captain Cakes aren't, like, quivering in their boots over the Queen. It's kind of treated as having, like, a tyrannical mayor. Like, it's just not that interesting. Not that interesting. Let me rephrase. It's not that serious. So why are their Darkners so terrified and feel like their lives are in danger? Well, it would make sense if it's because Noelle murdered some of them. Because she's, like, got her hair covered, like she's just blacked out, like kind of like how she does, her hair covering her eyes, kind of like how she does when she uses Snowgrave. So the theory goes, she kind of freaked out, thought she was under attack, probably because she was, probably because the Queen was trying to capture her, and she murdered a bunch of Darkners. And this plays into and then she forgets about it and blacks it out because that's what she does. This plays into the fact that Queen seems 100% confident that Noelle is super strong, despite all evidence to the contrary. And this could perhaps be why she thinks Noelle is so incredible. So with that in mind, I think this is a great theory. I love this. Because it adds this dark undertone to Noelle that, like, when backed into a corner, Noelle might be a bit of have some mental issues. Like, you know, people like to be like, oh, Noelle, she does all this crazy stuff in Snowgrave. And it's like, oh, it's because the Kris is turning her evil, excuse me. And it's like, okay, well, what if Noelle already has a predisposition towards unethical behavior? Maybe she's already got mental illness of some key variety, and Snowgrave just exploits that fact. Maybe Noelle is already a bit damaged in some key ways, and I think that's a very fun idea. I think that turns a relatively uninteresting character, in my opinion, into a much more interesting character. The number one way to make Jaru appreciate a character more is to insert trauma. It makes them so much more fun to watch. So yeah, A tier. I love this theory. It makes sense with the evidence. I think it makes Noelle even more of an interesting character because it shows that she's dangerous even without our input. And I think that's really fun. It has some fun implications. Noelle created Spamton. This is the theory that came up after the Spamton sweepstakes, where it became clear that Noelle and Spamton had contact with each other before they went to the Dark World. Specifically, it's implied that Spamton sent her spam email, and Noelle read it, and Noelle was the only person to ever read Spamton's spam emails. And Spamton was so grateful for that he sent her a peepus, and it was the world's first charity, as he put it. However, this goes further, because in one of Noelle's other stories, she creates a peepus. She creates an egg, and then at another point she creates a peepus using her... what's the game called? It's the game that she's interested in. Is it Mew Mew? No, wait, that's a real life thing. Is it Mew Mew Kissy Cutie related? I don't remember now. But it's some egg creation game that she has on her computer, and basically the theory goes that she accidentally created Spamton at some point using some code she found on the internet. I think that kind of confuses the plot I think that's not what was intended to be the reading. And when questioned about this, when they did the Spamton Q&A, Spamton literally was like, what? You think that Hochi Mama is my Mama Hochi? And basically denied it and said, no, she's just the only one to ever read my, spam. So I think this is just explicitly wrong. I think this is just incorrect and a misreading of the plot. However, this isn't about whether it's right or wrong. This is about whether I'd like it or not. Do I like the idea that one of the most mentally ill characters in Toby Fox history was created by Noelle? Yeah, that's kind of S tier, to be honest. I love that idea. That is fantastic. Just like how this characterizes Noelle as unhinged and dangerous, the idea that Noelle is so damaged that she created a character as deranged as Spamton is kind of delightful. I'm going to be honest. Like, it characterizes not only Noelle, but Spamton as well. It characterizes the both of them in a really tragic, toxic kind of way, and I kind of love that. Like, I kind of adore that. I think this is, like I said, I think this is explicitly wrong. I think this is just not canon. But the idea of characterizing Noelle as this, like, everyone thinks she's this cute sweetheart character, and then it turns out she's just a full-blown yandere. Hey guys, editing Jaru here, and I just wanted to point out that this section where I call Noelle a yandere was recorded prior to me being dogpiled on Twitter over this topic. For the YouTube audience who has no idea what I'm talking about, basically I mentioned on Twitter that I would find Noelle more interesting if she was obsessed with Susie to an unhealthy degree, rather than them just having a generic romance. However, my mistake was using the term yandere, which is an anime trope that is apparently considered offensive by some section of the Deltarune community. I did not know this at the time and was thus very surprised when a horde of people jumped down my throat over using the term. Obviously, I would not have used the term if I had known it would provoke such a response. I like making hot takes about characters. I do not like being called a gross ableist asshat. I only bring this all up to make it perfectly clear that me calling Noelle a yandere in this video was done before all that drama happened, and this is not me doubling down. I know plenty of would-be haters out there would love to take this out of context and make it look like I am doubling down even when I'm not, so I'm just nipping this in the bud. I am not doubling down. Do not revive this drama in the comments section or I will be very irritated. Okay, back to the tier list. Who's just actually, like, dangerous. Like, actually should be in a mental hospital level of dangerous to herself and others, is a concept I find super engaging. And this is basically what this would be implying. So, yeah, I'm going to put that in S tier, which is pretty funny. To be clear, this theory is wrong. I'm pretty sure it's just explicitly wrong. But I think it would also be fantastic. So I'm going to put it in S tier, which is hilarious to me. Next, Noelle killed Des by BanditGames. So this is the theory that Noelle used Snowgrave in real life at one point because she was scared and this caused like a snowstorm and it also killed Des. So yeah. Do I like the idea of Des's blood being on Noelle's hand? Yes. Absolutely. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, wow. The more I think about it, like, this is an utter meme. Okay, let me put it this way. I think this is wrong. I think this is incorrect. I do not believe in this theory for even 1 nanosecond. But I do love me some trauma. This is literally just my Kris theory, or my Asriel theory, but for Noelle, where instead of Kris killing Asriel on accident, it's Noelle killing Des on accident. I feel like it's necessary that as a brand, I have to embrace this theory. It's too up my alley. Yep, have to embrace it. Trauma, tragedy, bloodshed, perfect. I love it. S tier. Oh my god. Alright, let's keep this train rolling. Oberon Smog! Woo! Okay, so this is, for those who don't know, Oberon Smog is the theory I come up with at the end of my Who is the Roaring Knight video. And it basically argues that this is actually an extension of my Ralsei theory, which is right here. So basically, well, I say it's an extension, but it's a similar concept where Gerson died, his dust was put on his hammer was exposed to a dark fountain, and because it had the dust of a monster on it, it became a very special super darkener. My fans have come up with a variety of names to refer to these entities. Some of them call them Duskners, these entities that are part lightener, part darkener. Call them what you like. That's what Oberon Smog is. He has the memories of Gerson Boom, but is his own entity. He has his own personality, his own goals, and he's also the Roaring Knight. I think the evidence is there for it. How do I feel about the idea of Gerson Boom, basically, a version of Gerson Boom being the main night guy. This theory basically argues, that Gerson Boom is effectively the Asgore of this game. Or rather, it's not Gerson, but it's a version of a Gerson. And so what is my thoughts on that? Do I actually think that would make for a good Asgore-level threat? Absolutely. Gerson was one of the big unanswered questions in Undertale. Gerson is a character who is heavily implied to be this kind of legendary figure. It's not even implied, it's just stated. He's the hero of the monster war. He is the one Undyne models herself after. He is the oldest living non-goat monster in Undertale. And he saw the war. He's as old as Asgore. And he's a huge deal canonically in Undertale, but he does nothing in that game. So why build up this epic freaking character in Undertale only to have him do nothing, and then in Deltarune have him be already dead? That seems suspicious. That seems like you want us to be able to retroactively look at Gerson Boom in Undertale and go, wow, he was this legendary, awesome, epic monster who fought in a super war and survived. I mean, it makes sense. We saw how cool Oberon was, so it makes sense that his original conversion would be cool as well. That is the logic that feels intentional. When I see characters written this way, it just feels like something Toby Fox would do. Because something that I think a lot of people aren't really keeping in mind when theorizing about Deltarune is that whatever we do with the characters in this game will contextualize, or rather recontextualize, characters from Undertale. Whatever happens with Kris will recontextualize our opinion of either Chara or Frisk. Unless you think Kris is their own unique entity, but I don't. Whatever happens with Gaster will recontextualize how we view him in Undertale. Whatever happens with Sans, whatever happens with Asgore and Toriel and all these other characters, how they're characterized will affect how we view Undertale. Deltarune is not its own standalone game. It is it's the other side of the same story. And I think that's really cool. And I think Oberon Smog basically recontextualizing perhaps the most legendary monster in Undertale history is a really exciting concept. Do I think it's oh my god, it'll be the coolest character ever, S tier. Gerson's my favorite character, and now we'll get to have him as a main antagonist, ooga booga booga. No, I don't think it's that great. In fact, I kind of land at B tier. This may be blasphemy for my own community, because Oberon's absolutely the most iconic Jaru character. And for those wondering, Oberon Smog, where did I get this name from? It's an anagram of Gerson Boom. It's basically the logic that Ralsei is an anagram of Asriel, because he's a Duskner version of Asriel, and Oberon Smog is an anagram of Gerson for the same logic. I also think it's very indicative of Gerson being more important in this game because he actually has a last name, whereas he did not have a last name in Undertale. So yeah, but despite me having such a brand surrounding Oberon Smog and him being such an iconic character, he's absolutely undefined right now in terms of his personality, his motivations, his philosophy. I suspect currently that if Oberon Smog is real, he's going to be very Asgore-like in that he's trying to do what he thinks is right to save people and the world and the stuff he cares about, but he's terribly mistaken, and he's going to turn out to be bringing about the roaring in the end times, and it's going to be terrible. So I think he's going to be a tragic villain, like an anti-villain of sorts. A villain who thinks that he's the good guy. And I think that's always going to be interesting. I can't really put it above B tier because I don't feel very strongly about it. I like it. I think it'd be cool. I think it was something Toby Fox would do, but I don't feel very strongly on it. It's just sort of that would be neat. I like it more than most of these other Night theories. It might seem ironic that I put Night versus Alvin higher than Oberon Smog, but again, this isn't about what I think is more likely. I think Oberon Smog is canon. I do not think Alvin is the Knight is canon. However, having a priest be the main antagonist of a Toby Fox game, or at least the Asgore equivalent, is awesome. I love that idea. having the priest's dad, who's also a really cool monster from Undertale, be the main villain is also pretty cool, but I've never been such a big Gerson fan that this makes me feel much. Whereas, as a person who thought Father Pucci was the best JoJo villain, I find the idea of a priest being the main antagonist to be really cool. I want to see the religious commentary. I want it so badly. So I think it'd be really interesting to have Alvin as the knight. Even if I don't think it's true. I think it's a red herring. But I think it would be really, really cool regardless. Which isn't to say I think Oberon Smog won't be as cool. I think Oberon Smog, if it's canon, will be great. But for now, I don't feel as strongly about it. Papyrus is the Eggman. Basically, this is the idea that the unknown man who gives us eggs from behind the trees is Papyrus. C tier, I feel nothing. I probably already said this in the first recording session, but I do not particularly care for Papyrus. I mean, I don't dislike him, I just don't feel much of anything. So him being Eggman, I mean, whatever. I don't actually think my preferred theory for Eggman is on here. My preferred theory is that the Eggman is, how am I forgetting his name right now? He is, what is his name? It's Everyman. I think that's his name. Everyman? Yes, Everyman. Everyman being the Eggman is my current preferred theory. I like that idea, but I don't have very strong opinions on Eggman in general yet, because I haven't actually come up with an Eggman theory yet. So once I do, I'll give y'all a theory, and then maybe I'll feel differently. Like, I didn't feel super strongly about Gaster being the main antagonist of Deltarune until I did my Gaster Files video. Jeff. Jesus Christ. It's so hard to keep them straight in an unscripted video. So maybe once I do an Eggman theory, I'll realize how I actually feel about the theories surrounding this character. But yeah, there's that. A player will leave Kris and become the vessel. So this is the theory that at some point in the future, the soul that we're controlling will vamoose out of Kris and go into the vessel that we created at the start. And then either we'll fight Kris, or we'll team up with Kris, or something of that nature. I think this is... I'm not opposed to the idea of us controlling a character other than Kris, but I am opposed to this interpretation of it. This is just more the player's part of the plot stuff, and I'm not interested in that. And ultimately, there's a reason that we've only controlled Kris, and I think it's because we're not supposed to be able to control more than one character. So yeah, I think this is... I mean, if it did happen, would I like it? No, I wouldn't like it. I dislike it. Yeah, F tier. I don't like any player plot ones. Ralsei cares about the player, not about Kris, by Dorked. So this is the theory that Ralsei has a great deal of interest in pleasing the player and being friends with the player, but has no real interest in Kris as a person, and is only working with Kris because they're the one the player is controlling. Again, player theories I'm not really fond of. I don't like the idea of Ralsei being aware of the player. I'm not fond of Ralsei having interest in the player. I don't like the idea of Ralsei knowing anything about the player. So, yeah. Not interested. It's fine. Totally neutral, really. Well, I say totally neutral. Totally neutral in that I feel nothing even remotely positive about it, and I think conceptually, player theories are just not very good. I just don't like them in general. I just don't like it, as I've made clear. So yeah, no offense to Dorked, of course. This isn't a measure of whether it's true or not. There's plenty of reasons to think this theory is true. I just don't like theories involving the player. Ralsei has crush on player. Also goes here. This one's self-explanatory. Ralsei is aware of the player and has a crush on them. Ralsei has a shadow crystal. Okay, here's a good one. I just think this is canon at this point. Like, I just think it's just straight up true. I've mentioned this in several theories that I think Ralsei has shadow crystals and is using them to learn things that he wouldn't know otherwise. Do I think it's a cool idea? Yeah. I think the idea of Ralsei using shadow crystals to learn about the future and basically doing everything he's doing because he knows what's coming, I think that's a lot of fun. I think that adds a lot of intrigue to his character. That is really cool. Is it A tier? I don't feel so strongly about it. Like, I don't need him to have a shadow crystal. He could have this forbidden knowledge because he talked with Jeff, too. So it's like, he doesn't need the shadow crystal to be doing this sort of thing and know about the future. I just think it's just one avenue. But yeah, B tier. I like it. Ralsei is a girl. This is a theory popularized by a particularly well-viewed video. I forgot to put the name of the channel on it, but I also don't think I need to. If you look it up, you'll find it pretty easily. And also, I didn't want to, I guess, direct any hate at this person for the theory. In case it isn't clear, just because I don't like a theory doesn't mean I don't like the person, or I think the person is wrong or doesn't understand something. This is purely just my feelings about these theories and how much I'd like to see them be true. Ralsei being a girl, regardless of the evidence used, like, again, this is not about canon. This is not about whether I think this is true or not. This is about whether I'd like it to be true. If it turned out to be true, would I think it enhances the story or it'd be interesting to see develop? Yeah, I think it could be cool if Ralsei turned out to be secretly a girl, because that would play into the idea that he's not Asriel. If this whole time, he was basically pulling a Mulan and was trying to appear more like Asriel than he really is because of some plan of his. Like, he's trying to help Kris, and so he took on a form that he thought Kris would find more trustworthy or more appealing or whatever. Like, and then it turns out that, Ralsei really isn't anything like Asriel, and, he's his own entity, and he's not even a he. Like, I think there's a lot of fun that can be done with that. I think that's an interesting idea. And, like, if Toby Fox were to do it, and to be clear, this is based off just the simple sentiment of Ralsei is girl. I'm not talking about any of the specific evidence for Ralsei being a girl that the video suggests. I'm just talking about the concept of, oh, wow, in Chapter 4, we discover Ralsei was secretly a girl this whole time. Would I be down for that? I think it'd be cool. I think some people would prefer it not be the case. I assume they think that Ralsei being a male who is effeminate is more interesting and new and genre breaking or cliche defying than Ralsei being a girl who's effeminate. We already have Noelle being a super effeminate girl, so it seems a little redundant to have an effeminate girl in Ralsei. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of very Ralsei-specific storylines that you can do with this that would be very interesting. I also think this would probably help with the shipping a little bit. Not because, Ralsei needs to be a girl to ship them with Kris, but because Ralsei being a girl would prove even more clearly that Ralsei is not Asriel. And the more that is proven, the less disturbing the ship bait between them would be. And I'm not talking about the community. I mean, the game itself literally puts them into a swan boat in a tunnel of love, and Ralsei is blushing like half the time. Like, this is not subtext. I think it would alleviate, not because he needs to be a girl to prove that, but because that would further emphasize that he's not Asriel. So with that in mind, partially because I know it's going to make people's eyes melt out of their skull, I'm going to put this in A tier. Get her pranked. Fans, you thought I was going to have good opinions? You've been destroyed by facts and logic. Oh my god. Alright, let's keep it going. Oh man, we're on to an even better one. Ralsei is Asriel's dust. This is my baby. This is like up there with Oberon's smog for like my most iconic theory, where Asriel died. It's Kris's fault. And then, much like Oberon, Asriel's dust spread on some stuff, and that stuff got exposed to a dark fountain, and that created Ralsei, and that's why Ralsei looks like Asriel. It's because he was built from something covered in, or created from something covered in Asriel's dust, and thus imbued with Asriel's essence. That's why his name is an anagram. It's because Ralsei understands that he's not Asriel, but he also doesn't really know who he is, and so he just sort of made his name an anagram of Asriel. And this also plays into the fact that he has like some remnants of the Asgore lineage, because he's bad at naming things. He's like, well, I'm Asriel, but I'm not Asriel, so I guess I need a different name, but I look like Asriel, so maybe Ralsei, which is like an anagram. And so it's like, it all adds up in my head, and it is 100% one of my favorite theories. And it's really just an extension of the Asriel's dead possessing Kris thing. But here's the thing. This is kind of different from this. I mean, they're focused on different things. This is about what Ralsei is. This is about what's going on with Kris. So that's why they're kind of separate theories here, because they're focused on different characters. But like, there has to be a reason for why Ralsei, the way I look at it, there has to be a reason why Ralsei looks like Asriel and has an anagram of Asriel's name. And as far as I'm concerned, there's really only like a couple options. Either Ralsei is literally Asriel, Ralsei is a shapeshifter masquerading as Asriel in order to appease Kris, or Ralsei is made from something tied to Asriel. And I think that's the most common theory, is that Ralsei is made from something that has connections to Asriel. But most people go something like, oh, Ralsei is a persona that Kris made of how they wish they were, like they are Kris's ideal self or something like that, and that's why and Kris drew a drawing of themselves as a boss monster, and that's what Ralsei is. And it's like, I don't find that very interesting. I think that the big reveal being, oh my gosh, Ralsei is so similar to the extremely most important character of Undertale because of a doodle, is not interesting to me. Asriel is so important. Asriel is the main character of Undertale. So to have his presence in the narrative reduced to, oh, it's a doodle, does not interest me at all. Not in any way, shape, or form. So, yeah, Ralsei. But if Ralsei is a parallel to Flowey and is like this entity made after as the original Asriel died, that becomes super interesting and becomes S tier instantly. Because the idea that Ralsei is the Flowey of this world, and Flowey is already the best character Toby Fox has ever made, yeah, I love that. I love the idea of paralleling Flowey with Ralsei. I think that is the most intriguing concept. Mostly because I love Flowey, and I need a Flowey character in Deltarune if I'm going to love it to the same degree as I do Undertale. So, yeah, I just love that idea. Yeah. Load of fun. Love it. It's a bit of a meme. Mostly because I present like this big elaborate story in my original video where I'm like, and then Kris goes to this place at this date and this time, and they use a jello knife and they kill Asriel and it's an accident. And it's like, the specific details of that story kind of made me seem a little silly. So yeah, I think I gave the theory a bit of a unfortunate context, which made it seem less believable than I should have been. I think pretty much the core theory is actually totally believable. The idea that Asriel's dead, Ralsei was made from his dust, Kris is involved in somehow. I think that's all perfectly believable with the evidence we currently have. I think the evidence of, oh, Toriel says Asriel's coming home soon, I think that is some surface level fake nonsense that could very easily be wrong. I think that's enough. I get it. I've seen the comments. I can tell that if Asriel really is dead, then that one line from Toriel is enough to make it a complete shocker. Like, people will be jaws on the floor because Toriel said that line. Like, that's all it takes to convince people that a theory isn't true, and I find that really funny. I mean, that's kudos to those people, because I mean, they're going to enjoy this twist even more than I will. So yeah, big fan of that. I think it would be really compelling. Ralsei is evil. This is the theory that Ralsei's schemes and mysteries are all tying back to him secretly being a bad guy. It's not F tier, it's not player level, but I don't think it's as interesting as people are making it out to be. I like parallels with Flowey, I think that's an interesting concept, but I think parallels to the point of Ralsei also being evil isn't interesting, it's just a retread. And I don't think that's something I'm really interested in seeing. Obviously, Toby Fox could do it well. I'm not really interested in it, though. Ralsei equals Kris's ideal self. So this is the idea that, this is I kind of mentioned this already, but it's the idea that Ralsei is a manifestation of what Kris wishes they were. So it's like maybe Kris made a persona, and that's what Ralsei is, or maybe Ralsei is made from Kris's hopes and dreams of what they want to be when they grow up or something. Something like that. D tier. I think this is really vague and like, I don't know, surface level emotional, where it's like Kris wishes they'd fit in and Ralsei is like the manifestation of that, and I don't know. Again, I'm putting it in D tier. I feel negatively about it. It could turn out to be true, and I'm sure Toby Fox will do it well, but I don't right now. I think it's boring. I think it's kind of basic. Like, there's so many ways to make Ralsei interesting, and just being like, oh, he's Kris's persona is not really something I'm super into. Ralsei equals Kris's true soul. So this is the theory that Kris's soul, the red soul, is not their soul. It's some other person's soul. Maybe the player's soul. And Kris's original soul got taken and dumped somewhere, and that soul created Ralsei. Or whatever. Something like that. Something along those lines. I think it's a mess. I think this theory is a mess. I think this theory would make... I think it could be done well. I just think it's too messy. I think it's way more interesting that we're just possessing Kris's soul and Kris doesn't have their original soul. I think that's kind of whatever. I'm just not fond of that. I think it's convoluted, and it's not convoluted in a way that adds much. I think it's like, wow, Ralsei is more like Kris, which makes Ralsei less interesting. And Kris is possessed by something that I'm sure a lot of people are arguing is the player's soul, and that makes it a player theory. So it's like, depending on how you phrase this is either vague and convoluted or just F tier. Like, F tier because it's built on, oh, the player is the plot. So, yeah. Not fond of this. I think it's... yeah. I think it's just, it requires too much and adds too little. Ralsei is the red horn headband. This is the red horn headband that Toriel mentioned Kris used to have, because Kris used to wear it, and it means something to them, and therefore Ralsei, because Ralsei has pink horns. I feel utterly neutral about this. If it turns out to be true, then it doesn't really add much. It's like, oh, okay. Neat. Like, I feel nothing. It's like, it could absolutely be true, and if not true, then whatever. Like, in my Ralsei is Asriel's death theory, like, I basically argue that, oh yeah, Kris was wearing this outfit whenever they got Asriel killed, and that's why Ralsei looks like this. And it's like, so it's like, I'm obviously fine with this theory being true, I just don't have much strong opinion on it, and no strong emotions on it. If it turned out to be untrue and was a red herring, then I would not grieve. Ralsei is working with Gaster. As you saw in the Gaster files, I don't actually agree with this theory. I think Ralsei is working independently for their own goals, or his own goals, excuse me. However, I think it's not impossible that he's working with Gaster. Do I think this is a very interesting option, to have Ralsei secretly working with the main antagonist? I feel like this strays a little too close to, like, Ralsei's evil territory, where it's like, oh, Ralsei was secretly working with the villain. He meant well, but it went poorly. I don't know. I prefer Ralsei be knowledgeable and wise and trying his best than him being duped by Gaster. So, yeah, I'm just going to put it in D tier. Either you interpret as Ralsei as ignorant and getting duped, or you interpret it as him being villainous and selfish. And I just don't really like either of those options. Yeah, I don't know. There's ways to spin. I'm sure that it could be interesting. I'm sure the comments will provide some options. But on its own, not really something I'm interested in. Next, we have the Ralsei theory by Daisy Nose. I couldn't really fit in effectively what this theory actually is, but it's the theory that Ralsei is the personification of the hometown. So the reason he looks like Asriel is because Asriel was the darling child of the town. And the reason Ralsei can exist in any dark fountain, in any dark world, is because he embodies the entire town. He belongs, quote unquote, everywhere. And that's why he doesn't turn to stone. Whereas, Rule's card doesn't belong in the cyber world, Ralsei belongs everywhere. And that's why he can go anywhere. That's also why he has information that he shouldn't. It's because, like the names of Kris and Susie. It's because he just represents the whole town. He has all sorts of information. That's also why he has more information than other rulers. He knows more about the Roaring than Queen. And that's because, again, he is a very special entity. He's a very different entity. He embodies an entire location, thanks perhaps in part to the Grand Fountain. And I thought this was a very charming theory. I don't agree with it. I don't know if I think it's true per se, because I have my own theories about Ralsei, but I actually think this is brilliant. I think this is a really fun theory. I think I elevate it a little higher than perhaps maybe is absolutely fair, because I was so... in order to make this list, I had to go and watch every Deltarune video with the word theory in it. They had over 100,000 views. And the sheer number of Deltarune theory videos that are either not theorizing anything, where it's not actually theory crafting, they're just analyzing and saying, well, it could be a number of different things, was infuriating. And also a ton of other theories were theories, but they were arguing really basic stuff like Darkners are objects brought to life, or Deltarune is an AU, and stuff like that. And it's just it was stuff that's so surface level that it doesn't add anything. It's barely even a theory. So I was really getting tired of watching these videos. And then to finally see a theory that actually takes a leap and, takes a risk. Because people making theories like this or this, it's they're not even trying to be interesting. They're just being well, the evidence 95% points towards this being true, so I'll make a theory video on it. And it's that's not interesting, that's not fun, you're just reiterating what everyone already thinks. Whereas theorizing that something crazy like Ralsei is the embodiment of the hometown, it's that's fun, that's creative. That is taking a risk and putting yourself at, you're making yourself vulnerable to being wrong. And most theory, not most, but a lot of these theory videos that I saw were not taking any risks. And it was so repetitive and so boring. They would spend so long building up to nothing. And it was mind-boggling. So I was when I finally got to Daisy Nose and their video, I was ecstatic. I was just oh my god, something interesting. Something original. And it's also a really cool concept. It also explains a lot of the evidence in a really compelling way. I love it. I think it's a great theory. I think it's one of the best Deltarune theories I've ever seen, because it actually connects the evidence in an interesting way and takes a risk, which is what I think theories should do. If your theories are just looking at the evidence and saying, well, 2 + 2 likely equals 4, that's not interesting. That's not fun, in my opinion. This is all just my particular perspective. As the creator of many memeable theories that are so outlandish everyone thinks I'm either on drugs or a troll, I have a very particular perspective on what makes for an interesting theory. But don't get me wrong, I appreciate analysis videos. I love, most of what Andrew Cunningham does is analysis. Most of what Half-Bred Chaos does is analysis. They don't actually delve into actual theory crafting super often. But I love their content regardless, because they make some very interesting and intelligent conclusions and analysis. What triggered me was videos labeling themselves as theories, but not actually having any theories in them. or having barely any theories, like surface level stuff. Like, that triggered me. I did not like that. So yeah, obviously to each their own. I'm not, I'm not the police. I'm not the content police. Like, there's nothing wrong with the people who make these theories. They're making, and these videos had a ton of views for a reason. So it's like, maybe I'm the one who doesn't know what he's doing. I just personally found those videos really boring, and I didn't really like them. And that's why I found Daisy Nose's video so refreshing. But yeah, don't go harassing anyone or starting any drama. Obviously, these people are all just as valid in their opinions as I am. So yeah. Roaring has occurred before. So there's different ways to spin this, but this is generally not time loop theory. Time loop theory is something we'll get to eventually. Yeah, it's down here. But this is not the theory that the world's stuck in a time loop and the roaring has happened before that way. This is the theory that the world is linear in its timeline, but the roaring is an event that's occurred before. And that's why, like, there's dust piles and creepy black oil in Ralsei's kingdom, and that's like the remnants of a previous roaring, and maybe Ralsei lived through that roaring, and that's why he knows so much, etc. I don't agree with it. Because I don't like it, because it implies that Ralsei is this ancient entity who lived for thousands of years. Because the roaring destroys the world, in case you don't recall. It, like, wreaks havoc on the world and, like, destroys all the Darkners and, like, leaves the Lightners in utter chaos. So, like, seeing as how the Light World is depicted as being basically Middle America in modern day, that would imply that we got nuked to the Stone Age by the roaring, and then a huge amount of time passed before we got to a place where we could have it happen again. And I just think I think that warps Ralsei's character into something very different. Him being this ancient entity doesn't really click with me. And I think there's lots of ways to have characters have visions of the future. And I think you don't need to have it be this, like, cyclical event that's happened in the past. Like, I like time loop theory because it doesn't make the characters immortal entities with thousands of years of experience. Because immortals are weird. They're written very differently, and they're just not relatable in the same way that normal characters are. So yeah, I don't really like this theory personally. I just don't find it very compelling. Rules is Gaster. So this is a theory that I've kind of fed the fuel for, because I've shared on social media several times a thumbnail of mine that is, Rules is literally Gaster, not a meme, not a metaphor. Like that's the text on the thumbnail. So this is a bit of a memed theory because of that. How do I actually feel about the theory? Do I think it's true? Well, obviously, I think some version of it is true if I'm making a thumbnail about it. Or at the very least, I've entertained the possibility. It's not canon until I make a video, okay? It's not part of the Jaru-verse until I actually say it out loud. But no, if it turned out that Rules was literally Gaster, I have to go eat lunch. I'll be right back. Alright, I took a break for lunch. I'm back. I kind of forgot where I was at. I think I'm on Rules as Gaster. Yeah, because we're at Rules down here. So yeah, Rules is Gaster. I've memed about it slightly on Twitter, which is to say I have some ideas for this possibility. And but I don't want to spoil everything about what I might theorize regarding this. If it were true, if Rules was Gaster, and he was secretly the main antagonist of the narrative, would I like that? No. I think it's fine to have a character like Sans be this goofy, wacky guy who turns out to be scary. It's a different thing to have, like, this would be like if Asgore hung out with us and acted like a complete buffoon, and then at the very end was like, by the way, I am Asgore Dreamer, and I have killed 6 children, and it's like, that would be ridiculous. That would be absurd. and I don't think I can take it seriously. So yeah, I'm putting Rules as Gaster in D tier. My own theory is slightly more complex than just Rules is Gaster, despite what my thumbnail may imply. But yeah, that's my opinion on that. Rules is important. This is the theory that Rules is anything more than a goofy side character. Yeah, I'm inclined to think not only is this be something that'd be fun, but I also think it would be interesting. It's sort of like the Sans situation, where Sans is a silly goober who turns out to be really powerful and have a deep, complex, engaging backstory. Like, when you first meet Sans, he's like, oh, he's a funny skeleton. And when you first read Rules, it's like, wow, he's this total goofball. I would love for it to turn out that there's a ton more complexity to Rules. Is it on the tier of all these other things? B tier has generally been things that I felt vaguely positive about, but nothing super strong. I'd be really happy if Rules was important. I don't feel super passionate about it, though. I think it could be fun. Sans is a Darkner. Disagree. So this is the theory that Sans is, like, because, you know, in Undertale, Sans is like one of those teleport doors that we only see in the Dark World, and when you go inside Sans' room, it's like all dark, and it uses a soundtrack called like Creepy Room or something, which is very similar to the creepy door and creepy cliffs and creepy chase themes that are used in the Dark World. So like, there's some evidence suggesting Sans is tied to all this dark stuff. Do I think that means Sans is a Darkner? No, I don't think he's a Darkner at all. Do I think it's an interesting idea? If he really was a Darkner, would it be cool? Would it be interesting? It could partially explain why he bleeds, if he's not really a human or a monster. I think I'm largely neutral on this one. I think Toby Fox could do something with it. I don't think it's inherently a bad idea, and I think it does answer some questions. I'm just not sure how compelling of an answer this would be to the Sans mystery. Sans is Ness. I don't know why. To be clear, this is not the game theory Sans Undertale is Ness Earthbound. This is a new theory that Sans Deltarune is Ness Earthbound. F tier. I don't even need to explain further. Sham is Secret Boss. I'm contemplating if I want to add more. If I actually want to think about what my opinion would be. Thing is, Sans isn't Ness. He doesn't act like Ness at all. Screw it. F tier. Sham equals Secret Boss. So this is the idea that Sham, at some point in the future, will be a secret boss that we battle. Would I think that's fun? No. No, I don't think I would. Don't get me wrong, I like Sham, and I think it could be cool, but I didn't really want to fight Gerson in Undertale. I kind of liked that there was this powerful monster who you just never got to fight because he didn't feel like it, because he knew that it would be pointless. And I think keeping some things out of the player's reach, I think that's a very valid strategy, and I think it has some interesting context to it. Like, maybe Sham hides in shops for the same reason that Gerson did, you know? Maybe he knows that there's something special about shops that makes you safe. Either way, I don't feel super harshly against it. Like, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I'm sure it could be cool. I just don't feel very strongly in favor of it either. So I'm going to go C tier. It could be cool. I'm not super invested, though. This is the theory that the secret bosses represent the 7 deadly sins, with like Spamton representing greed and I think Jevil pride. Regardless of how well the current secret bosses match up with deadly sins, the idea of Toby labeling all, because like philosophically, what I believe the secret bosses represent is philosophical responses to the idea that their choices don't matter. The idea that they have no legitimate agency in this world. Jevil responds with hedonism, and Spamton responds with a desperation to achieve freedom. And these are different philosophical responses. So considering that they have also been driven mad by Gaster, who is heavily associated with, the number 666, which is a satanic thing, having these people who have been corrupted by him represent the 7 deadly sins is very, very on brand. It would make a lot of sense, and I think philosophically, having these characters represent sinful, aka incorrect philosophies that Toby Fox is opposed to and does not agree with, I think that's a lot of fun. I think that's a very intriguing approach. I think it's at least B tier. Is it A tier? I'm constantly talking about how I love the religious commentary potential. So if this, I think I have to go A tier on this. I think, regardless if it's true or not, the potential religious connotations and what this could mean from a thematic philosophical standpoint is too juicy to pass down, to turn down. So I gotta go A tier. I think this is a really intriguing idea. Very cool. Shadow Crystals show time loop. So this is kind of an extension of the time loop theory, but it's specifically the theory that the shadow crystals show you a previous cycle of the time loop. Namely, which is to say that Deltarune is trapped in a time loop. It's in a Groundhog's Day kind of situation where every so many days or months or years or whatever, the universe is reset back to a certain point in time. And the shadow crystals can show you previous loops, previous cycles of the time loop. And that's why we've seen things that are typically depicted from the past in the shadow crystals. This is a theory that I came up with. I'm sure some other people may have thought of it, but it's one from my channel. Do I think it'd be cool if it was true? Yeah, I think it'd be a cool reveal. Because everyone's, contemplating all these potential interpretations and then reveal, it's revealing the time loop. I think that'd be a fun reveal. I don't feel super strongly on it, I don't think. I think it would just be kind of cool. The shadow crystals are a very minor part of the plot right now, so I think it'd be impractical for me to feel strongly about it, no matter what the theory was. Next is Spamton is the wrong number caller from Undertale. So for those who don't know, in Undertale, one of the fun events, which is random Gaster-related events that can occur in depending on your fun value. One of them is if you go to the top of Snowden, you can get a wrong number, and someone will be like, "Hey, I'm looking for someone whose name starts with G," which everyone assumes is Gaster. And then they're like, "Oh, this is the wrong number, haha," and then they sing the wrong number song. And people have theorized that this is Spamton, who's somehow gotten his wires crossed and contacted the wrong Gaster, or the Gaster from another universe, or it's the Spamton of the Undertale universe, or something like that. I am vaguely positive on this. I think it would be a cool foreshadowing on Toby Fox's part to be hinting at Spamton that far ahead. I don't feel very strongly about it one way or another. I would never think about this wrong number call ever again. It's one of those Gaster events that I have no opinion on and no emotions attached to. I wouldn't care enough to theorize about it myself. So I'm more than happy to accept this theory as true, because what else? What else am I going to believe it to be? So yeah, pretty solid, pretty decent. Susie is from a human community. So this is the idea that Susie was, before she moved to the hometown, she lived in a human community. She grew up around humans. I don't know who originated this theory, but I've mentioned that I would quite like it in the past. I think it would make for a really interesting story. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and put it in A tier, just flat out, because I think the idea of grounding Susie's interest in Kris in the fact that she's not comfortable around monsters is a really interesting idea. Because it's she picks on Kris because she's, a bully, and that's her way of expressing herself. She doesn't know how to make friends any other way, because that's just how she is. But she specifically feels more comfortable interacting with Kris because she's used to humans. She's not used to monsters. So I find this to be a very very compelling theory because it just makes Susie a much more interesting character. Right now, Susie's kind of in the same boat as Papyrus and other characters where it's like, I kind of feel like she's kind of a C-tier character, where her character is just sort of a bit of a cliched bully with a heart of gold, and I don't really care much about her. This would add some nuance and complexity to her that I think could be really interesting. So, yeah. A-tier for me. I quite like this theory. Susie has a bad home life. I mean, yes, I agree. Generally speaking, kids like Susie tend to have problems at home. So, yeah, I 100% buy this. I think this is just straight up canon. Do I think it's a good thing? Yes. I think anything that adds trauma and tragedy to a character tends to make them more interesting. So, yeah. I'm not like head over heels in love with it. It's not S tier, but I think it's A tier. I think it makes Susie a more interesting character, and that's a good thing. Susie is half human. Okay, now we're getting into some crazy territory. So, in my pop-up lore video, I pointed out that there's an ad that is shown to Kris at one point. And the ads from pop-up seem to be targeted at the individual party members. And one of the ads Kris has shown is monsters for humans in your area, or like a monsters human dating website. I forget the specifics. It's been a minute since I looked at that. But basically, it's evident. The fact that the ad exists suggests that humans dating monsters and being in romantic relationships with monsters is a thing in the Deltarune world. And since it is entirely possible that humans are compatible with monsters, then it's entirely possible that Susie has a human parent and a monster parent. And if I were to guess, I'd guess that it's her mom who is the human and that her mom skipped out on her dad. And that's why Susie is very bitter towards humans and also is very envious of Kris's monster mom. At least that's my theory. Then again, Toby might go the more cliched route and have it be like, oh, it's the deadbeat dad who's the human. So, who knows? But I would prefer it be the mom, because I think bad moms is a bit of a running theme in Deltarune at the moment. So, do I think this is true? I think there is plenty of reason to think this could be true. You know? Do I think... But more importantly than if it's true, do I think it would be good? Do I think it would add to the story? Yes. Not only do I think it would add to the story because it would make Susie more complex, and as I've already shown with these other theories, anything that makes Susie more complex is good. I think it would thematically tie in really well with Kris and Ralsei. Kris is a human raised by monsters. They are a human who has always wanted to be like monsters. So there's already, they themselves are already like caught between worlds. Ralsei, especially if my theories are correct, is caught between the world of darkness and the world of light. He has no subjects, but he also didn't have any friends in the form of Lightners. He had nothing from the light world or dark world. He looks like a Lightner, but seems to have knowledge and abilities akin to a Darkner. He is caught between two worlds. Having Susie be of mixed lineage, and as a result not feel entirely comfortable in either society, is, I think, perfect. I think it makes the three of them perfect friends for each other that have all the means necessary to relate and have some really interesting and compelling conversations. I think Susie being half human is A tier. I think it is really, potentially extremely compelling. So much so that I'm actually going to put it in S tier. I think Susie being half human would be epic. I think that would be fascinating. I would love to see Toby Fox explore that territory because it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And it would open up the world in a very interesting way. Like, something that I always thought was a bit like, something I always liked in Doctor Who was when they showcased, like, different... Because, like, it's a big plot point in Doctor Who that the fate of humanity is to get out amongst the stars and get busy with a ton of different alien species. And so I love speculating about the different half-human, like the mixed human-alien species and aliens that can be encountered in that setting. I think it's a very fascinating topic. So I think this would be awesome. I would love for this to be true. I think it would add a whole new dynamic to Susie that would make her even more interesting. Like, her being raised around humans, very good. Susie having a bad home life, very good. Her being inherently, fundamentally, totally different from everyone around her, S tier. I love that. Next is Susie Can Resist the Player by Mystic Slime and Tiger Shark 859. This is a theory video they did in which they just basically speculated that, Susie has the ability to resist the player. I don't remember the rest. Let me pull up their video because I'm actually struggling to remember the specific details of the theory. Okay, yeah, so the TLDR is Susie's personality is very headstrong and she has a lot of willpower, and that allows her to resist the player's influence. I think this is built upon the idea that the player is, like, directly using psychic powers to control the party members rather than just trying to command them, like, authoritatively, which is what I actually think is the case. I don't think the player has any control over anyone except Kris. I think we could command them in combat because they trust Kris and are willing to do what Kris says, but I don't think it has anything to do with, like, the player having limited control over characters in this reality or something like that. Yeah, and generally the video kind of treats the player as being this, what's the word? When you're actually part of the narrative. Let me look it up real quick. Diegetic. It's generally worked out the player being diegetic, which I don't agree with. I don't think the player's part of the narrative. Yeah, I'm not super fond of the idea that, Susie can resist the player's control because she's strong-willed. I think Susie can't resist the player's control because the player has no control over her. So yeah, not particularly fond of this one. It's just not something that it just doesn't drive with it just doesn't jive with my personal views of how Deltarune works. So, yeah. Not to say it's a bad theory, but it just doesn't click with me personally. Tea theory. This is the theory that the tea you can get in the Cyber City of different flavors of party member shows us information, and that information reflects the party members' opinion of each other. So if you get Kris flavored tea and you have any of the other party members drink it, then their reactions and the amount they heal from it indicates how positively they feel about Kris. And the same is true for the rest of the party drinking any of the flavors of tea. This is just another one I think is straight canon. I think it's a fun and subtle way to kind of hint and flesh out the characters' relationships and their stories. Or not their relationships and their stories, but just their relationships and their how they feel about each other relative to each other. Like maybe Noelle having 200 healing from Susie T isn't just because, she's in love. Maybe it's because, no, she's obsessed to a dangerous degree. Like, that could be fun. That could be some Noelle killed Des drama levels. Like, full yandere Noelle is definitely something I'd be on board for. But yeah, no. Generally, I think T-Theory is just straight up canon, and I like it quite a bit. I think it's fun. Time loop theory. So this is the theory that the Deltarune universe is stuck in a Groundhog's Day style time loop, where after however many days, weeks, months, years, the timeline gets reset by an angel-like entity, like Hyper God of Death level power, who then resets it back to to some point, like Chapter 0 or Chapter 1 or something like that. This is a theory that I first really hammered home in my What Happened to Deltarune's Magic video, and it's only become a more important part of my theories ever since. Personally, I think this is one of the most compelling things about Toby Fox's writing is, or like I think the idea of Deltarune being an exploration of the philosophy one would develop when stuck in a time loop forever. I think that idea is more compelling than almost anything else he could be writing. Like, I either, if there's a more compelling option than this, I have not seen it suggested. I think the idea of like, oh, Ralsei is doing everything he's doing to make his friends happy because of the time loop. Or, I don't know, what's another one? Jevil and Spamton have been driven mad because they've understood the truth of the time loop. The idea that Gaster is this main antagonist who's trying to oppose an angel because he's opposed to the time loop. Like, there's so... Oh, and then, like, these two developing very specific philosophies that count in response to the time loop. Like, there's so much intrigue and drama and tragedy and philosophy, and the way it parallels Undertale by being like, okay, what if instead of being the hero who breaks the cycle, what if we're the people stuck in the cycle? What will that feel like? And I think that's a fascinating concept. Yeah. And I just, regardless of whether it's true or not, I adore this concept. I think it is super tragic, super compelling, super interesting, and it's something I would love to be true. Like, absolutely love. Next is Toriel is homophobic. And funny enough, none other than Shayy of DeltaCast speedrunning fame has stated that he would like to give his 2 cents on this theory. So I'm not entirely sure where I'll put it. I might put it right here, or I might put it at the end of me talking about it. But I think he's going to be sending me a little clip to play. So you'll see that clip when you see it.
What a beautiful, bright, sunny morning to rip a theory a new asshole. So I'm sure many of you have probably heard about the homophobic Toriel theory before. Now, I catch wind that my friend is making a tier list here with all the different theories, so I decided this was finally time enough to talk about how fucking awful, how much of an F- garbage tier theory this is, and how I actually think it might have done harm to Toriel as a character. You know me, I'm no stranger to making jokes about this. In fact, I've joked about this thing so much that people think I actually believe in it, which is why I am now going to take a hard stance on why this theory is some dog ass. And you know me, I can never resist a good ass ripping. So let's tear this thing apart piece by piece. 1, Toriel is mad at Asgore because he is having an affair with Rudy. First of all, how does that make her homophobic for being upset about that? I think anybody would be pretty mad if their married spouse was cheating on them. I mean, I wouldn't be exactly very thrilled about that. I don't think that would constitute her being homophobic if she didn't like Rudy or Asgore after that, if that was even a thing. I mean, first of all, that's making the assumption that those two are like, getting it on together. That's just an assumption. We don't know that. Have you ever heard 2 middle-aged old dudes talk to each other? You'd think they're the gayest guys on the planet Earth, because holy cow, I mean, whew. Second, homophobia exists in the Deltarune universe because Rudy uses the term fruit to describe Asgore. I guess I'm a fucking homophobe then, because I describe things as fruity quite often. Oh, damn. That's rough for me. Point number 3. Toriel splits up the kiss between Alphys and Undyne in the true pacifist route of Undertale. This is stupid. She is clearly doing the overprotective mother trope because Frisk is in the room. We know Toriel is no stranger to being a wild party animal. So, I mean, this is very clearly supposed to be her being an overprotective mother. If she was actually homophobic, why the hell would she hang out with Undyne and Alphys after this? Just ask yourself that question. I mean, they're good friends in the alarm clock texts, which, by the way, this theory references because of the Asgore Rudy stuff. So you can't have it both ways. Number 4, Toriel is religious and therefore is homophobic. What? You know, like half of America is like Christian, right? Like if you look at a census, making the assumption that people that are religious or have religious beliefs are automatically homophobic is extremely reductive and just bad. I don't know. I kind of take offense to that. I'm not going to lie. Point number 5. Asriel is trans because of the shampoo, the unused bottle of shampoo underneath the sink in Deltarune. No, that's not what the joke is supposed to be. The joke is that the shampoo is pizza flavored. And it probably smells rancid. I mean, would you want to go around smelling like a fucking Chuck E. Cheese all day? That sounds awful. That sounds miserable. Terrible. I wouldn't want to smell like a Chuck E. Cheese. I wouldn't want to smell like I've just been smothered in a ball pit by a bunch of greasy children who smell like pizza. That sounds terrible. And that's basically what Ices is in the Deltarune universe. So, like... And point number 6, Toriel's adoptive child in both universes, especially probably Deltarune's, is at the very least gender non-conforming. You think a homophobic person would be a caretaker for what is most likely a non-binary protagonist? What? Make it make any degree of sense. This theory is so bad that I think it's actually done damage to Toriel as a character, to the point where, like, you can't even joke about it and people will be like, oh yeah, no, that's true. Like, I joke about the homophobic Toriel thing all the time as a bit on stream and people think I'm being serious about it. No, this theory is dog water. F-. Actually, you know what, Jaru, make a tier below F-. Make a fucking Z tier. Z. I don't care how you pronounce it. Put this thing in the garbage bin. The trash can. I don't want to see it. Get rid of it.
In the meantime, I'll go ahead and give my opinions on it. I guess I need to go watch the video, huh? Ooh. You know, it's funny. I've avoided watching this video because it's such blatant clickbait. Oh, dear. Okay, yeah, I'm going to go watch it, and then I'll be back with my opinion. Be right back. Holy Christ. Oh, my God. I thought I leapt to conclusions. Oh. Oh. Okay. Okay. The TLDR of the theory is Asgore is in gay relationship with Rudy, which gets Toriel angry, which is why she divorces him. And it's also because she's homophobic, because she doesn't support that relationship, even though they're married. So she doesn't need to be homophobic to oppose infidelity. But anyway, she's also religious. So, and she interrupts Alphys and Undyne's kiss in Undertale, so definitely homophobic. And then that is impacted on her children, who are now sad because they are gay and or trans, and Toriel is homophobic religious woman. And then it also spirals into some other stuff about the mayor being QC, who's a bunny named Cinnamon, and I'm not entirely certain how that tied back into the rest of the theory. I was kind of shell-shocked. Yeah. Would I be happy if it turned out Toriel was homophobic and Asgore was gay? Or bisexual, question mark. Yeah, that's a... homophobic Toriel. What does homophobic Toriel add to the narrative? Nothing. I don't think it adds anything. I think it just makes a character unlikable that didn't have to be. Especially considering she's generally very kind in almost every aspect of her life. And the one person she's ever shown not being kind to in Undertale is a mass child murderer. So, yeah. And then Asgore and Rudy being gay for each other, I think is a stretch at best. It's weird because I'm having to try and separate my opinion of how well the theory was put together and how likely it is to be true from whether I'd like it to be true, which is a different feeling. Would adding some moral nuance to Toriel by making her homophobic be interesting? No. It would just be a caricature making religion look bad, which is not, I think, interesting. It's like, oh, religion bad makes you homophobe. It's like, that's about as one-dimensional a characterization as it gets, and I'm not really interested in that. And then Asgore and Rudy being infidelitous gay monsters, bisexual monsters, I think would just add some bizarre, random, petty drama that doesn't add much. It's like, yeah, I don't really get that. I don't get that at all. No, I think that's F tier. I think that is, ooh. I don't know what Shayy said or is going to say, but, you know, it's not my place to judge people for their theories, so I'm not going to say the theory is bad. I'm just going to say that I would not be particularly happy if this theory was true, and leave it at that. Toriel kills Undyne by SwankyBox. If I recall correctly, this is the theory that in Deltarune Chapter 3, there will be a Snowgrave-like run where instead of Noelle killing Berdly with ice, it will be Toriel killing Undyne with fire. I'm not sure how he spins it in the video, SwankyBox, but I actually have heard a version of this that I think could be compelling. If the way the Weird Round works is that it's all about manipulation, and we manipulate different characters in different ways, where, like, we manipulate Noelle by being really assertive, forceful, making her do things, because she's too weak-willed to stand up for herself, so she just falls in line. So, like, that was the way we manipulated her. But then with Toriel, maybe with her, we could instead force her to kill people by letting Kris take a lot of damage in combat. So kind of like how in Snowgrave, we have to not kill enemies and just let Noelle kill them. Maybe in the Chapter 3 Weird Route, we have to let Toriel kill enemies, and specifically we have to make sure Kris takes a lot of damage to trigger her mother bear instincts and get her to violently defend her little baby. I actually really like that idea. I think that's really fun. I'm not saying that's the theory that SwankyBox here is presenting, but I would say that's probably a sub-theory within this theory. And that's enough to elevate it to an interesting potential level. So I'm going to put this in B tier. I think there's potential to be really interesting if true. Next is Universal Mother Theory. So this is the theory that, and there was a specific YouTuber who presented it. I don't know why I didn't put some YouTubers on here, but if you look up Universal Mother Theory, you'll probably find her, or them, or whoever. I don't remember the gender or pronouns of the person who did this. But it's the theory that Queen in Chapter 2, her relationship with each of the individual Lightners and party members is reflective of their own relationships with their mother. So, like, she's got this cordial, like, trusting, alcoholic behavior around Kris because maybe Toriel is alcoholic. She has this assertive, cold personality around Noelle because Noelle's mother is assertive and cold. She has... she just goes into detail. I think I remember being most I found the most dubious part of it was their theory on how the Queen having such a forgetful attitude towards Ralsei is reflective of Ralsei's mother being absent or generally not very interested in their child's life. And I thought that was very funny because I was like, okay, well, maybe Queen has no connection to Ralsei because Ralsei doesn't have parents because he's a Darkner. So, I don't know. I thought that was a little funny because I was like, I think there's an easier answer here. But generally speaking, the idea that Queen represents the dynamic of the motherly relationship of all the different characters she interacts with, I think that's a fun idea. Regardless if I think it's true or not, I think it's cool. I think it's kind of like T-theory in that I think it, like, having a character who thematically reflects the relationships of other characters is really interesting. I do agree that I think it's just straight up canon that Queen's relationship with Noelle is meant to reflect Noelle's relationship with her own mom. I'm not so sold that that's the case with all the other characters, but I do like the idea. I think it's cool. I think it's fun. Overall, pretty interesting theory, pretty fun. I think any theory that generally gives us better insight into characters is going to get a thumbs up from me. Undertale Sans is from Deltarune. This was a theory that I kind of had to combine a bunch of theories together into one category. Basically, any theories that are based around the idea of Undertale Sans and Deltarune Sans being one and the same, or traveling to each other's world, or anything of that nature kind of just falls under this category. But the most common version of this theory that I saw was that the Sans we see in Undertale, he is from another world and he's trapped in the Undertale reality, but his home reality was Deltarune. That is the most common version of this theory. I think this is basically just straight up canon. This is another one that I think is just straight up true. And I think it's great. I think Sans is the best, like, besides Flowey, I think Sans is the best Undertale character. And this would just be elaborating on him and making him more interesting. So, yeah, I totally support this theory. I think it'd be awesome if it was true. Yeah, very good. Very good stuff. And then lastly is Woody theory. This is a theory I have yet to watch. I've been putting it off because I'm lazy. So I'm going to go watch that real quick and I'll be back with my thoughts. Okay. Yeah, I'm still recording. Okay. Wow. Well, that was certainly a video. I'll be honest, when I clicked on the Woody theory, I didn't expect it to be 75% Jaru slander, but, oh well. Interesting. Duly noted, spooky dude. Someone doesn't like Jaruverse theories, I see. I digress. The actual theory of the video is that there's a Woody-like character whose show got canceled, and that Mike is like the microphone box inside of Woody, and it forces him to say certain things, kind of like how Kris is possessed, etc. Sounds like a good theory to me. Sounds fun. I think it would be pretty cool if it was true. I think it would line up with a lot of things. It lines up with a lot of stuff that, Toby Fox has been putting out. There's certainly some evidence for it. It helps support the theories and, not the theories, the themes of the narrative with, like, possession and choice and freedom and strings and puppets and so on. So, yeah, this seems like as good a way to handle that topic as any. Yeah. And with the whole idea of, like, all the secret bosses being discarded, like a Joker card that's never used, or a spam bot that no one ever clicks on the links on, or a cowboy character from a show no one watches anymore. Like, these are all concepts that tie together fairly well. Yeah, this is like a B tier, if not an A tier. Like, this is probably the best theory I've seen for a secret boss. You know what? Yeah, I'll go A tier. Yeah, this is really well put together. I wish more of the video was spent on this. You spend so long explaining why we shouldn't listen to anything you say, and it's like, come on, man. Have more faith in your theories. You don't have to have 20 minutes of build-up to be like, and that's why you shouldn't believe me. It's like, you can just say something, and just, like, you could just have a theory and have fun with it. You don't have to be, like, so cautious and worried about it not being true. Part of the fun of theories is being wrong. Then you get to, try new stuff. Adapt your strategies. Take risks. But yeah, as a whole, very fun theory. I think it's very interesting. Very much something that Toby Fox would do. And with that, I do believe my phone alarm is going off and interrupting the recording. But no, I do believe we've reached the end of the tier list. That is 85 separate, prominent Deltarune fan theories put into a tier list. And dang, we've got quite the pretty even spread. We've got like, what is this? 3, 6, 9, 10, 12 some odd F tiers, 21-ish D tiers, 13 C tiers, 12 B tiers, 21 A tiers, and then a solid 6 S tiers. All right, good work, Deltarune community. Like, y'all have come up with a good spread of fun theories and bad theories and wacky theories and all sorts of stuff. And of course, this tier list is just my opinion of, like, how much I want these things to be true. It's not even ranking them based off of how much I think they're likely, hence Ralsei being girl and being up here. But, you know, and let's do one quick recap and see how biased I was towards my own theories. I have 1 in S tier. I have 2 in S tier, 3 in S tier, 3 Jaru theories in S tier, so which is like half of S tier. So I do think I was a little biased, at least. Then what else? I mean, I guess you could count this as a Jaru. Nah, people had to convince me that. I'm not counting that as a Jaru theory. I'll take this one. I'll take this theory as mine, so I'll call that a 1 in A tier. What else? That's it in A tier. Oberon Smog, that's 1 in B tier. That's a second one in B tier. I also have this theory. This is part of mine, so that's another B tier, 3 in B tier. Then we get to this. Anything else? I mean, I have concluded that Gaster is central to the plot, so I wouldn't say that's specifically a Jaru theory, but it's certainly an option. Certainly something I'm a proponent of. I'm a proponent of this. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think it should go to... I think it's kind of obvious that I'm going to put my theories in the upper half of a tier list, purely because I wouldn't... Because, like, these are theories that I think are true, and I'm never going to conclude that a theory is true and be something I don't like. You know? Because, like, I really like Toby Fox's work, and I really like his storytelling and his characters and everything he puts into them. So, generally, if I were to, like, come up with a theory in myself and go, man, that sucks, I hate that. If I concluded, yeah, it's almost certain the Gas League theory is true, I probably wouldn't like Deltarune. I would probably be like, well, here's my theory. I think this is true. Also, by the way, I'm not making any more theories because I don't like this game anymore. Like, that's what it would have to be for me to be making theories down here. Like, if I sincerely thought it was, like, it was a game where theories that I genuinely dislike were true, I wouldn't probably be that invested in making theories for it. So I think it was inevitable I'd have some of my theories ranked pretty high. But after all, this is just ranking based off of what I enjoy and what I would like to see be true. It's not based off of evidence or facts or likelihood of being true, just off of my personal tastes. And with that, I do believe we've reached the end of the video. Bit of a silly little project, you know, it's not that complex. It's mostly just here to be a little fun thing at the end of the month to give you guys some subjective, unscripted Jaru opinions. And of course, this tier list template will be linked in the description below, and I highly recommend my fellow Deltarune YouTubers, give it a go. Do your own videos ranking Deltarune theories. I'd love to see it. It's just a fun way to show where our headspaces are at regarding the future of Deltarune. yeah, very good, a lot of fun, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I think I need to do a shout out for my patrons real quick. A huge shout out go to my patrons for their very generous support. I would specifically like to thank E-Roll, Hannah Brown, Suit Number 1, and a Switch Jog for their very generous Noelle tier donations. Your support is greatly appreciated, and I'd like to give an extra special shout out to Super CKX7 and Captain APEC for being the only ones mad enough to support me on the Ralsei tier. Thank you very much. All of you are insanely kind to be giving me this much support. It really does mean the world. It feels like there's always more expenses on the horizon, always more bills, always more medical emergencies, and it puts me at ease knowing that I have such an incredibly supportive group of people at my back. You all are truly wonderful, and I can never express my gratitude. Thank you all very, very much. And with that, I think we've reached the end of the video. Like if you enjoyed the video, comment if you've got something to say, subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, have a fantastic day.